This audiobook was created based on my original work. Full, yet still incomplete, text of the story is available. Use the link in the description. 2-in-1 Reincarnation. Prologue. One by one, flickering candlelights slowly filled the nave of the great cathedral of Orium with a warm glow. Intricate divine symbols, crafted with meticulous care, glimmered near each candle, their magical ink sparkling like stardust. These symbols of divinity crept throughout the cathedral's nave and sprawled across the intricate, mosaic-covered walls and the breathtakingly crafted marble pillars stretching up towards the high arched ceiling, as if reaching out to the heavens. Incoherent mumbles suddenly filled the space as the slivers of light monks and priests who had offered their souls to the merciful goddess Manera began to chant. They were preparing to ask their guardian deity of the great empire, the goddess of light and wisdom, the flawless radiance, to save her people once again in the most ambitious ritual ever attempted. The great door of the enormous room opened and closed as the last three people entered. The first to enter was draped in a luxurious dark blue cowl embroidered with gold spirals, cradling a golden staff with a gem known as the tear of the goddess levitating at its tip. His name was Quintus Silvinius, and he had been leading the Church of Manera for nearly 40 years, but in this moment, he felt like a child once again. Turning slowly, he smiled at his colleague who wore a similar outfit typical of high-ranking members of the Church of Manera. "Isn't this just beautiful?" he asked the younger and slightly chubbier sliver named Chaos Livvis. "It truly is, your radiance," the man replied with a genuine smile, which then froze and gave way to a slight ironic chuckle. "If only we didn't have to spend nearly a quarter of our yearly budget to prepare this." "It's a small price for salvation," the older man said without a second thought, as he quietly admired all the work that had gone into preparing this divine work of art. "Now, we pray for the light to lead us on our journey." Subconsciously, he repeated one of many prayers, and as always, he felt the gentle touch of Manera in his soul. The second man quietly repeated his prayer and looked back at the last of the three men that had just entered the nave. Aurelius Quintus Tiberio. He was tall, wearing gold-plated armor that didn't make a single sound as he walked behind them. His bodyguard looked curiously at his superiors, expecting orders. "Was there any problem with security?" Chaos asked nervously, his eyes darting around the room. "Have your Templars secured the roof?" "Everything is taken care of," Aurelius replied quietly, his voice heavy and rough yet gentle at the same time. The chubby priest nodded, but he still seemed unconvinced. After all, they had put so much effort and money into this, and there was always someone trying to prevent good from happening. "We are prepared." Noticing the uneasiness of the priest, Aurelius reassured him once more. Chaos looked up to the knight with a weary smile. His words seemed to soothe him. After all, knowing he was being guarded by the strongest Templar of the Church and likely the deadliest warrior of the entire empire was a comforting thought. "If you say so," he said. "We are but slivers of light," the huge man in armor answered, and as they neared the center of the cathedral, he excused himself to take up his post with a nod of his head. "Nothing but slivers of light," Chaos replied in kind, with a stiff smile, and bowed his head as well. Turning back to follow Quintus, he tried to steady his breath, and with a silent prayer on his lips, he rushed to catch up. The deep voices of the slivers echoed through the cathedral, singing ancient words of divine prayer. Dormant magic in the air began to pulse, and the candle flames flared with a bright gold light, dimming, and rising with the rhythm of the chant. The scent of the magical flames filled the air, sweet like honey and spicy like cinnamon, entrancing the slivers and captivating the souls of all who were present, and the singing slivers hypnotically raised their voices as one. His Radiance Quintus stood tall in the center of the nave, raising the treasured staff high in the air, and a ray of light appeared. The domed roof of the cathedral began to rumble, shaking the foundations and echoing through the nave. He looked to the night sky to see the goddess they had entrusted their existence to. The dim light of Manera slightly flared as she heard the call of her children, and she reached out to the staff, to the cathedral, to her slivers of light. As her light touched the ground, the magical symbols erupted with a bright golden light, and night in the cathedral turned to day. But it wouldn't be that easy. Something unexpected happened. The slivers of light, who had just moments before been in a trance-like state, chanting in harmony, started screaming in agony as the divine flames burned away their flesh. They fell one by one to the ground, their screams echoing in the nave. The scent of burning flesh filled the air, a nauseating odor that overpowered the sweet smell of the magical flames. Chaos, unable to look away, watched the unimaginable unfold before him, tears streaming down his face. He was sure they were prepared for this, but it seemed like it wasn't enough. His faith wavering, he was filled with fear and uncertainty, his mind racing with thoughts of failure and desperation. Quintus felt it too, the strain of the power, magic of the ritual, was at its limit. But they had to continue, even if they had to sacrifice some. "Do not fear," he shouted. "We are but slivers of her light. We will complete the ritual." But he could feel it, the immense power of the goddess was wavering. He could sense a rhythmical pulsing of the power they were unleashing through this ritual, and the consequences of failure were dire. "We must press on no matter what," he shouted, desperation and determination in his voice. "We must not fail. We are her chosen. We must not falter." His eyes were wild, his face was intense, and he pounded his staff on the ground as if to emphasize his words. "We are but slivers of her light, and we will complete the ritual." And another one fell, screaming. The entire nave of the cathedral began to smell like burned meat. Chaos, confused and scared, pushed his back against one of the giant pillars and watched the unimaginable unfold before him. He was sure they were prepared for this. With guidance from the Manera, spending ridiculous amounts of gold, and gathering the strongest-willed slivers, yet they were still failing. What more could he have done? He felt his faith wavering, and he had a surge of doubt as he was filled with fear and uncertainty. "We seek salvation in the light of Manera," Quintus shouted, a crazed laugh escaping his lips. When could there be a better time to be taken by the goddess? He laughed, completely captivated by the moment of this great ritual. Chaos shook his head a little. He wanted to believe, wanted to trust in the goddess, but doubt still lingered in his heart. He was right. His radiance was correct. They were but slivers of the light. They were made for this moment. Chaos stepped forward, crossing the sacred runes that pulsed with the touch of his goddess. He paused for a moment, fear gripping his heart, but he steeled himself and stepped into the light, where one of the slivers had just fallen. He raised his hands into the air and joined in the chant. His body filled with magic, a violent surge of power nearly lifted him from the ground, and he felt his body strain painfully. But he didn't waver, he didn't stop. Staring into the blinding light, he chanted the sacred words, as others continued to fall around him. It was nearly done. Quintus's maniacal laughter echoed through the nave. They were on the brink of achieving something that would go down in history as the event that ultimately saved the world. No matter how much he had to sacrifice, he would fulfill the will of Manera. He was happy to have lived long enough to reach this pinnacle of his existence. He could feel it now. The ritual was nearly successful. They just needed one more push, one more strain of power. Manera guided his hand, and he knew she needed more. He decided in that moment, he didn't need to think about it. Sacrificing everything. Taking all the magic, all of the slivers chanting in the ritual, even himself, he gave it all. Suddenly, in the great surge of magic, the chanting stopped. The blinding light of the ritual dispersed in the moment, and only the dim shine of the divine glory of Manera was reaching through the open ceiling to illuminate the nave of the great cathedral of Orium. Quintus, arm outstretched and staff held high, felt the power of the ritual surging through his body. His whole being was filled with a divine energy, his eyes glowing with a bright gold light. He felt as if he was being taken away, as if he was being taken in by the goddess. He was completely captivated by the moment, and his maniacal laughter echoed through the nave. Suddenly, the power of the ritual surged and Quintus felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if he was being torn apart. He was being taken away, and the divine power was growing too great for his body to contain. With a final surge of willpower, he raised the staff and shouted as loud as he could. But in that moment, the blinding light of the ritual dispersed. Quintus fell to his knees. He had done it, he had completed the ritual. But he had also lost himself. With this last thought, he embraced the power of his goddess and joined her in her radiance. Like in a mausoleum, this was the first thought of Aurelios, the only one still standing, the only one alive. He led the order of Templars, he was the champion of the goddess, and he was deeply struck by the sight before him. Why hadn't she reached for him as well? In this thought, he fell to his knees. Looking up to the light of the goddess coming through the open ceiling, he prayed. He was confused. He had been here to guard the lives of the slivers, but he had failed. As he sought the guidance of Manera, he noticed something troubling. Her light was dimmer than before. Springing back to his feet, he was panicking. Had something happened to the goddess as well? He couldn't see the sky from the nave of the cathedral that well. Rushing to the door, he forced it open and ran through the empty halls until he reached the closest balcony. From there, he could see the beautiful silhouettes of the buildings of this grand city, capital of the empire, Augustalis. The glorious show of lights, the majestic palace of the emperor standing tall on the opposing hill, all draped in white marble and adorned with gold and cobalt decorations. But he didn't look at the city, not at all. His eyes were fixed on the sky. There she was, the goddess he had worshipped and adored his whole life. Shining with a dim light, glorious and magical, slowly moving, swirling like calm water, the light of Manera. But as he had feared, her light was weaker than usual. What had happened to her? Now he noticed the Templar that stood guard there. Lucius, what did you see? Aurelios asked urgently, calling the knight by name. I thought I saw a light, sir, the frightened knight replied, his voice quavering. It was like a star, coming from the goddess. It grew brighter and brighter, then it began to flicker. Then, like a shooting star, it flew westward, but it didn't land. Aurelios followed the direction with his eyes. To the west? Aurelios nodded slowly, thinking about what the knight was saying. He glanced up again, feeling a twinge of worry, but then the light of the goddess shone bit brighter again and he felt a wave of relief wash over him. Whatever it was that had happened, it seemed like the goddess was weaker, but still safe. Closing his eyes, he prayed for her guidance, calming himself. He knew his duty now. Turning back to Lucius, he nodded, we must investigate what happened and find out the source of the light. Gather the Templars and prepare for our journey. Find Felix and tell him to make haste, we leave for the west at once. With these words, Aurelios turned and made his way back into the cathedral, determined to find out the truth and save the empire once more. Chapter 1. Embracing the Unknown. Scene 1. A stranger's reflection. Opening my eyes, I felt disoriented and vulnerable, as if I had just awoken from a terrible nightmare. The cheerful chirping of birds and the pleasant scent of the forest wafting in from the open window were a stark contrast to the haunting images from my dream. The warm sunlight filtering in through the window touched my skin, but it failed to dispel the growing sense of unease that filled me as I sat up on the side of the bed. I swung my legs over the side, feeling the cool wooden floorboards beneath my bare feet, and took in my surroundings with a sense of curiosity. The room I found myself in was small but cozy, adorned with cleverly crafted wooden furniture, potted flowers, and lush plants that added splashes of color to the space. It felt alive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I stood up to explore, a thought suddenly struck me: who was I? Panic set in as I realized that I couldn't remember anything about myself before I woke up. My heart began to race with anxiety, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I tried to focus, to remember anything, but all I got was a blur. A sharp, shooting pain lanced through my head, causing me to gasp and stagger. I clutched my head, feeling as if my skull was about to crack open. The pain was so intense that I had to lean against the wall for support, my breathing coming in short, ragged gasps. And just as quickly as it had appeared, the pain vanished. Frantically looking around the room, I caught sight of a cupboard with a small mirror lying on top of it. I stumbled over to it, my hands shaking with nerves. My heart was pounding with anticipation, but my strength suddenly left me. I fell to the ground with a loud thump, my eyes squeezed shut, my mind racing with fear and confusion. Who was I? What had happened to me? Tears filled my eyes, but not from the pain of the fall. I felt lost, alone, and afraid. Immediately, heavy footsteps approached from outside, and the door swung open with a slight creak. A man stood in the doorway, his rugged appearance contrasting with the gentle expression on his face. He had long brown hair tied back into a neat ponytail, and wore a worn but clean linen shirt with a sword strapped to his side. As he saw me lying on the floor, his brow furrowed in confusion. Panicking, I tried to put some distance between us. But my legs refused to work, and I crawled away helplessly. The man raised his hands in a gesture of peace and spoke to me in a soft voice: "Wait, calm down. Please, let me help." "Are you hurt?" "No." "Who are you?" I cried out, my voice sounding foreign to my ears. Something was wrong, but what was it? "Stay back," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I'm Dirian," he replied, holding up his hands in a calming gesture. "I'm here to help you. Please, just tell me what's wrong." He didn't come any closer, allowing me some space to gather my thoughts. I tried to make sense of what was happening, but it was all so confusing and scary. My cheeks were wet with tears, I wiped them away, feeling my own skin with my hand. Once again, I didn't recognize this basic sensation, adding to my sense of disorientation and fear. "I don't know who I am," I blurted out, tears streaming down my face. "I don't remember anything." Dirian's expression softened with understanding. "It's okay," he said gently. "Just breathe." He then turned towards the small cupboard near the door and window and retrieved a small mirror. "Here," he said, holding it out towards me. "Take a look." I hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take the mirror from him. As I held it up to my face, I saw a young elven woman with blonde hair that had a slight green tint near the roots. It was strange to look at myself, the face felt both familiar and alien at the same time. "Yuna found you in quite complicated circumstances, she saved you and cared for you," Dirian said as he slowly backed towards the door. "I don't know much more. I was told to stay nearby in case you woke up. But I'm relieved to see that you're awake." As I finished examining my face in the mirror, I found myself feeling calmer. Lifting my eyes, I noticed that Dirian's posture was tense and his eyes flickered with an unspoken wariness. I tried to stand up again, and with the support of the wall, I managed to do so. "Who are you, and where am I?" I asked, hoping to get more information. "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, didn't I?" The man smiled gallantly and bowed his head. My name is Dirian. I'm a traveler devoted to Lyre and a servant of the gods. His words were friendly, but his eyes held a certain detachment that made me wonder if he was holding something back. I had the sense that he was hiding something, that he was keeping a distance from me even as he offered his help. After a brief pause, he looked up and asked, "And may I ask your name?" "Talis," I replied automatically, surprised at how easily the name came to me. "Nice to meet you." He stood tall again and then hesitated. "Maybe you should sit down on the bed and rest a bit more." "Should I help you?" I realized that it must have been quite strange for me to just stand in the corner of the room wearing only a light nightgown. Suddenly, I felt weirdly exposed, and the idea of getting into bed didn't sound too bad. "I can do that myself," I said, pushing myself off the wall and making my way to the bed. Dirian lingered near the door, and I could sense his cautiousness. "Why that sword? Did I do something?" I asked nervously. I didn't remember anything, but his behavior made me feel uneasy. "Not to my knowledge," he replied hesitantly. "As I mentioned, you were found in a strange situation, and I'm just being careful." After an awkward moment, Dirian's shoulders slightly relaxed and he excused himself from the room. "I will be right outside, if you need something." Lying there, my unfamiliar self, my alien surroundings, with the soothing but still strange sounds of the forest coming from the window, sudden wave of sadness came over me and I could not stop the silent tears that run down my face. Giving in to the desperate cry, I began to sob quietly, feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Eventually, exhaustion overtook my emotions, and I drifted off to sleep. Scene 2. Falling from the skies. I was abruptly awakened by a soft knocking on the door. Blinking my sore eyes, I realized it was dark outside. "May I come in?" Dirian's voice asked through the door. "Sure," I mumbled, struggling to sit up in the bed. Dirian entered the room, holding a platter with a steaming bowl of porridge and a few pieces of bread. He approached the bed with a gentle smile, moving with care not to spill the food. Sitting down on the edge of the bed, he handed me the platter and helped me adjust the pillows so I could eat comfortably. "I thought you might be hungry," he said softly. Grateful for his thoughtfulness, I smiled up at him. But as soon as our eyes met, his gaze quickly shifted away, and he stood up from the bed as if suddenly remembering something. "Thank you," I said, feeling a bit confused by his sudden change in demeanor. "Please stay. I want to talk." Dirian hesitated for a moment before forcing a stiff smile. "Of course. What would you like to talk about?" Suppressing the uneasy feeling in my gut, I decided to push forward with some of my questions. As the aroma of the porridge reached my nose, I realized just how famished I was. Without hesitation, I took a slow sip of the steaming bowl of perfection. "Oh, I was starving," I announced loudly with a grin. And to think that I would have a personal chef, I chuckled, trying to break through the wall Dirian had put up just a moment ago. He responded with a slight smile. "Thank you," I added sincerely, taking another sip. I thought about what to ask him first. "Now please, tell me, who is Yuna? You said that she saved my life." "You don't even know who Yuna is?" he asked, taken aback by my question. "Of course not. I don't even know who I am." I joked, my mouth still full of food. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have," he started to apologize, but I cut him off. "No, it's fine. Just please tell me about her." Dirian hesitated once again as he was gathering his thoughts and then started talking while sitting down on the chair near the cupboard. "Yuna, the goddess of birds and songs, is one of the deities that watches over this land. I have dedicated my travels to Manannan Mac Lyre, another god, who is currently visiting here in her home. We call it Nest. We are currently staying in the Nest. It is an enchanting and magical place. You see, we are in the treetop of the treehouse." I listened intently, taking in his words as I continued to eat the delicious food. Dirian was so passionate when talking that I couldn't help but be swept up in his enthusiasm. You should see it from the outside, he said, it's a sight to behold. And the tree itself, where the nest is built, belongs to none other than Cernunnos. At the mention of Cernunnos, Dirian's face fell. His eyes grew distant, as if lost in thought. He's a dear friend of Yuna's and one of the gods, he said, his voice softening. But he's not here now. He's away. I sensed a sudden shift in Dirian's mood. Is everything okay? I asked, concerned. Dirian shook his head, a pained expression on his face. It's complicated. I could feel the weight of Dirian's words as he spoke. It was clear that something was weighing heavily on his mind. What happened? I probed gently. Dirian hesitated for a moment, then let out a deep sigh. I don't really want to talk about it, he admitted. We can talk about it later, you need to rest now. I don't want to rest, I said, stopping Dirian as he turned to leave. Just talk to me. I felt frustrated. I knew nothing about myself or the place I was in. I sighed and looked into Dirian's eyes with a bitter smile. It's hard for me. I'm scared and lost, and you're only making things worse. How am I making things worse? Dirian asked, clearly confused himself. I opened up to him. You're nice to me, but you keep your distance, and I don't know why. You're not my attendant or chef. I'd guess you're my guard, here to stop me from wandering around. The last part one said to myself, trying to make sense of the situation. Dirian hesitated when I asked him what he was doing there with me. I'm not here to hurt you, he finally said. I want to help you, to learn about you. Why? I asked, standing up from the side of the bed. I knew I was being aggressive, but I needed answers. I took steady steps towards him, not minding the thin and flowing nightgown I was wearing. Dirian's hand unconsciously traveled to his sword. I was asked to keep an eye on you. I already told you that, he said, looking at me with a forced smile. I noticed his hand on the sword and stopped in my tracks. I'm not going to hurt you, I said, holding my hands up in surrender. Dirian relaxed his grip on the sword and let out a breath. I know you're not, he said. It's just that you're not like the others, and I don't know what to expect. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here, I said, feeling lost. I'm sorry, Dirian said with a pained expression. I can't even imagine what you're going through. This time his words felt sincere, and I could sense his empathy. Then tell me something, anything, about me. Why am I here, and why do you need to keep an eye on me? I took a step closer, hoping to finally get some answers. I don't know much, Dirian began, his sad expression now sincere. But if you really need to know, I'll tell you what I can. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. I wanted to wait for a better time, but you can have it now. I was determined to finally get my hands on some relevant information. I nodded decisively and stepped back a bit. Manera. Does that name seem familiar? He asked. What do you think? I raised an eyebrow. Dirian chuckled. Fair point. Well, that's the name of the goddess of the empire. His tone was different from when he talked about Yuna and the nest. His face was dark, and his tone serious. Nobody really knows why or how, but you appeared by her will, using her power. She's a threat to Yuna and others, and so are you. I was trying to take this information in. Nodding slowly, I had a question. Why am I still alive then? Dirian looked insulted. Do you take us for barbarians? I grinned. Well, given the circumstances, it's a valid concern. Dirian's face softened, and he let out a small laugh. You're right, it is. But we're not that barbaric, I promise. I appreciate that, I said with a smile. So, what happened then? Why am I here and don't remember a thing? I don't really know myself, but I can tell you what I saw, Dirian offered. I nodded, intrigued. I'm all ears. Dirian trudged wearily through the ancient forest of Corwin, feeling the weight of the ages upon his shoulders. This was Cerneno's sacred land, where trees grew tall and magic flowed like a river. The villages that dotted the forest were hidden from outsiders, and their inhabitants worshipped the old gods of nature with fervor. His destination was the village of Orion, the nearest to the mythical nest and adored by the worshippers of Una. It was a familiar journey, but this time, he would experience something that would forever change him. As the night deepened and the forest grew still, a brilliant streak of light pierced the sky. Dirian watched in wonder as the shooting star blazed across the heavens, leaving a trail of sparkling gold in its wake. Its dazzling radiance captivated him, but the unearthly sound it emitted sent shivers down his spine. He followed it through the night, drawn by its allure. When he arrived at the place where the sky touched the earth, it was already too late. The ground was scorched and blackened, trees had been shattered and burned, and the air smelled of death. But amidst the destruction stood a massive oak tree, radiating power and magic. Dirian approached cautiously, sword at the ready, looking for survivors of this fiery carnage. As he drew closer to the oak, he saw what had caused all this devastation. The great oak he saw was a weapon, the greatest magic he had ever witnessed. In the roots, branches, and within the very bark of the tree, there was entangled, compressed, and torn remnants of a terrifying monster. Its crimson flesh painted the oak in a grotesque display of violence, the last, desperate act of Cerneno's, who had given himself to strike down this demon and stop the fiery bloodbath that had fallen from the sky into his forest. Near the roots of the gravestone of the tree, there sat a bloodied, weeping goddess, holding a beautiful unconscious young elf girl in her arms. The girl was Talis, dressed in stunning violet armor with silver embroidery, looking like a warrior even while unconscious and injured. Dirian could hardly believe his eyes. It was a scene of utter devastation, and yet there was something otherworldly about it, something beautiful in its horror. He approached the goddess, his heart heavy with compassion and respect. That was how they met, but Talis had no memory of it. "I am so sorry," Talis whispered under her breath after a moment of silence. "I wanted to wait," Dirian added quietly, "for you to recover first. I don't know what to say." With silent tears in my eyes I looked at Dirian. Deep inside I expected to see him looking at me with disdain, but his expression was gloomy and sad, nothing more. "It was not your fault." Standing up abruptly said Dirian, breaking tension in the room with his dismissing tone. "Now rest, that is what you need. Leave this hardship to the gods, it's not your alone to bear." With this, he excused himself out of the room, taking with him the dishes. I stayed sitting up on the bed for a few minutes, thinking over everything I learned from Dirian. And there was nothing that I was more curious about than learning more about myself, mysterious Talis, the elf. Mustering courage, I decided to try something. Before today, I tried to remember things from before this room. With the pain it caused I panicked, but I felt something. My memories were surely there, just obscured, hidden, guarded. Maybe for good reason, but I still wanted to remember. Breathing deeply, I prepared myself for the pain and pushed into my mind, asking myself questions. As expected, horrid pain shot through my skull, nauseating and disorienting. Grinding my teeth, focusing not to scream out loud, my head was about to break open. My thoughts scattered, I could not focus on what was there to find. Stopping this futile attempt, I flopped on my side, in the bed covered in cold sweat, muffling my ragged breaths into the pillow. I didn't achieve anything but torturing myself. Exhausted, I drifted into the deep and painless sleep. Scene 3. Nesting Buddies. Once again, I regained consciousness in the familiar room, greeted by the cheerful melodies of birds outside the open window. The morning was beautiful, with a pleasant chill in the air that carried the enchanting scent of the forest. It brought a smile to my face as I stood up, feeling more confident in my steps this time. Making my way to the window, I pushed aside the swaying curtain to take in my first glimpse of the world beyond the room. Unfortunately, my view was limited to the dazzling treetops adorned with dew and the glistening sun. It must have been early in the day. I briefly wondered if there was a place where I could enjoy a better view and decided to embark on a little exploration. As I reached the door of my room, I cautiously opened it and peered outside. The spacious room I now beheld, similar to the one I had stayed in, had an irregular shape. It was filled with lush greenery, encompassing the sprawling branches of the tree on which the nest was built. Overflowing with furniture, benches, tables, chairs, cupboards, and cabinets, the room seemed to burst with numerous keepsakes and trinkets. Feeling a mischievous urge to explore on my own, I chuckled at the thought, but then hesitated. Perhaps I shouldn't wander off alone. Dirian? I called out, hoping to find him nearby. Is anyone here? As I waited for a response, I paused near one of the cabinets, captivated by a stunning wooden carving of an eagle diving for its prey. Admiring its beauty, I heard a rustling behind one of the nearby doors. The door soon opened, revealing a drowsy Dirian, still adjusting his sword belt. Why so early? He questioned, meeting my gaze, before a faint smile curved his lips when I remained silent. I'm just teasing. I suppose you're eager to explore. Sorry, I replied with a smile. No need for apologies, he shrugged off my remorse. But I won't go anywhere without breakfast. As he spoke, he already made his way toward one of the smaller alcoves within the grand yet cozy main room of the nest. The alcove descended a few steps below the main level, creating a slightly separate space. It led to a spacious balcony adorned with a small trestle table and 2 wicker chairs. However, my focus was drawn to the view. Hastening toward the edge, I had to halt myself, realizing there was no railing. From here, I had a better vantage point, witnessing the magnificence of the nest and the towering tree it rested upon. But what truly caught my attention was the myriad of delicate trinkets gently swaying in the wind, hanging from the treetop by thin strings and nearly invisible wires. Exquisite ceramic and wooden beads, feathers preserved in resin and wax, and small, often rustic carvings of birds in flight, some marked by time, others appearing fresh and pristine. Careful, Dirian scolded as I stood close to the edge, approaching the balcony with 2 servings of cold porridge from the previous evening. Yuna, for some reason, dislikes railings. So, please try not to fall. While speaking, he arranged the food on the table. It's so beautiful, I exclaimed loudly, reaching for one of the swaying wires and taking the feather tied to it into my hand. These are offerings and gifts that the people of Corwin have given to Yuna, he explained calmly, undisturbed as he disappeared back into the nest. Soon, he returned with a rather large jug and 2 carved cups, continuing the conversation. She holds great sentimental value for these items, so let's try not to break them. Releasing the feather, allowing it to dance with the wind once more, I joined Dirian at the table. Thank you for the food. You're welcome, he responded casually, beginning to eat. I sat there, momentarily perplexed, before I gathered the courage to voice the questions on my mind. You're a mystery to me. Isn't everything? He interjected between bites, his eyes fixed on me. Smiling wistfully at him, I carried on with my thoughts, as he remained silent. I just can't figure you out. You don't make any sense to me. This time, he merely observed, intrigued by where my words were leading. Yesterday, you were so serious and sometimes compassionate. And what happened to all that? I don't know you, so I have to keep my sword by my side. Pausing for a moment, I studied his face. I can barely recognize you now. After contemplating my words, he responded with a more serious tone. I reflected on yesterday. I realized that I made mistakes, as you pointed out in the evening. I only managed to make things worse. As he spoke, Dirian reached for the jug and filled the cups with water. I understood that I was too intense, so now I'm trying to be more relaxed. Then he smiled and slid one filled cup towards me, taking the other for himself. But I'm afraid it has only confused you further. He chuckled. I apologize for that. Dirian appeared genuine, and I didn't feel the need to press him further on the matter. Instead, I decided to focus on my breakfast. Setting my spoon down, I remembered something that had come to me while I was sleeping. I just remembered, I said, pausing momentarily. When I was asleep, something came to me in a dream. I recalled a few images and a couple of words. This piqued Dirian's curiosity, causing him to stop eating and look at me with interest. "That's great," he responded. "I saw a large, bright square right in front of me, surrounded by darkness," I explained, feeling excitement as I shared the details. However, a part of me remained cautious, observing his reactions and attempting to gauge his response. Dirian placed his bowl on the table and listened intently, a bright smile on his face. "What did you see?" he asked eagerly. "Well, I also remembered the word pizza," I continued. "It sounds strange, doesn't it? Do you have any idea what it could mean?" I decided not to mention the additional details of swords and blood that were also part of the dream. "I'm afraid not," he chuckled. "Pizza," he repeated, finding amusement in the word. "Perhaps it's the name of a town or village." "That would be quite an unusual village," I chuckled along with him. "But who knows? I have no way of knowing." We laughed together, and just as he was about to respond, my attention was drawn to a strange sound emanating from the forest below the nest. I turned abruptly towards the noise, but there was nothing there, just the swaying of trees and rustling leaves in the breeze. "What's wrong?" Dirian appeared perplexed by the sudden shift in mood. "Didn't you hear that?" I asked, my voice filled with tension. "There's something in the trees." Dirian chuckled in response. "Of course, there is," he reassured me. "You're in the home of the gods. We're not alone here. Don't worry about it. We're perfectly safe. If you'd like, we can explore further." I glanced back at him, still feeling a strange sense of unease, but I forced myself to calm down and put on a smile. "Yes, I would like that," I agreed to his proposition. "But first we finish breakfast," he added, picking up his food once again. Scene 4. An avian fashion voyage. After enjoying a satisfying breakfast, Dirian guided me to a room where a set of fresh clothes awaited me. As my eyes fell upon the neatly arranged ensemble resting on the bed, I couldn't help but admire its beauty. I gracefully shed my previous attire and slipped into the new outfit. The tunic dress draped effortlessly over my form, its fabric gentle against my skin, allowing me to move with ease. Embracing earthy tones, it blended harmoniously with the natural surroundings, exuding a sense of serenity. Delicate embroidery adorned the edges of the dress, showcasing intricate patterns inspired by the wonders of nature. Vines, leaves, and charming birds had been meticulously stitched along the neckline, cuffs, and hemline, adding a touch of artistry to the ensemble. Completing the attire were knee-high boots, crafted from supple leather, displaying a rich brown or chestnut hue. As I fastened them, a peculiar sense of familiarity washed over me, and I discovered subtle embossed patterns that resembled the texture of tree bark, infusing the boots with a unique character. With the belt adjusted to my liking, I directed my attention to the thoughtfully placed accessories on the nearby table. Among them, a pair of feathered earrings caught my eye. Beside them, a braided leather bracelet adorned with a glistening gemstone. And finally, a delicate pendant necklace gracefully dangled from a slender chain. Yet, it was the wooden circlet that resonated most profoundly with me. Intricately carved branches and delicate leaves adorned its surface, emanating an undeniable elegance. With a gentle smile curling on my lips, I placed it upon my head, feeling a sense of completeness and transformation. Fully attired and adorned, I stood before the aged, imperfect mirror. This change somehow renewed the energy inside me, and with a surge of excitement I rushed out of the room to meet Dirian and finally explore the surroundings of the nest. As I hurriedly left the room, I swung the door open with a little too much enthusiasm, startling Dirian, who was standing near the balcony where we had just had breakfast. A small bird perched on his arm took flight in panic. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," I quickly apologized, watching Dirian's reaction. "No, it's nothing," he brushed it off, but there was a hint of something in his voice that made me question his response. "I've just been informed that Yuna wants to talk to you," he smiled, and any traces of his earlier jumpiness vanished. Where are we meeting her? I inquired. I hope it's somewhere outdoors. I'd like to explore a bit. Then you're in luck. Come with me, Dirian answered, his smile fading almost immediately. You should know, we'll meet her in Cernenos's garden. I trust one don't need to tell you this, but please try not to upset her. As we descended the spiral stairs inside and outside the grand tree of the nest, he continued speaking. I'll do my best, I assured him, trailing his steps and taking in the surroundings with my eyes. We conversed quietly along the way until we reached the ground. The nest's tree towered above the others, its grandeur even more pronounced from this perspective. I observed the chilly morning air, touched by the gentle caress of the sun, casting a warm glow upon the enchanting square in front of the nest. The area was adorned with neatly trimmed grass and lined with flat stepping stones of various sizes. Above, in the breeze, ropes and wires gently swayed, holding Yuna's gifts. Several trails branched out from this square, winding through the trees, and I spotted a few figures moving about. They weren't quite people, I couldn't discern their features clearly, and their movements seemed irregular. These are the children of Cernenos, the guardians and caretakers of this sacred forest, Dirian responded to my unspoken question. They prepared our food and clothing. I'd like to meet them, I smiled and started heading toward one of the figures behind the trees. Don't, Dirian cautioned, taking hold of my hand and bringing me to a stop. Now isn't the right time. They aren't like us. They feel the loss of Cernenos more profoundly. Besides, don't seek them out, if they take a liking to you, they will approach you. Then how can I thank them? I inquired. Simply stay on the trails. That's enough, Dirian smiled and released my hand. Let's continue. We have places to be. I followed Dirian through the forest, walking along a narrow yet well-maintained trail. The surroundings were enchantingly beautiful, and glimpses of the mysterious creatures moving about still caught my eye. We maintained a leisurely pace, allowing me to absorb the world around me to my heart's content. Scene 5. Beneath the gaze of gods. After a few minutes of walking through the tranquil forest, we emerged into the most beautiful garden. The center of the garden held a large gazebo-like structure, its roof open to let sunlight bathe the interior. The whole place felt like a living painting, as if nature itself had taken a brush and crafted this enchanting scene. Neatly cared for trees surrounded the area, their branches intertwining to create a natural canopy, gently shielding us from the sky. The play of dappled sunlight through the leaves created a dance of shadows on the ground, adding to the magical ambience. Lush ferns, vibrant flowers, and moss-covered rockeries with clean puddles and ponds adorned the surroundings, releasing a rich, refreshing aroma that tickled my senses. The gentle hum of birdsong filled the air, intertwining with the rustling of leaves in a harmonious symphony, enhancing the enchantment of the place. Even as I was not fully recovered, I had to suppress the need to skip into the garden. The allure of its beauty and the promise of meeting Yuna filled me with excitement and curiosity. I felt like a child who had stumbled upon a secret garden, eager to explore every nook and cranny. As we approached the gazebo's stone pillars, the sound of a melodic voice reached my ears, pulling me out of my reverie. The stone structure loomed before me, each step revealing more intricate details. The pillars were meticulously chiseled to mimic the shapes of ancient tree trunks, their branches entwining to form the roof's open center, creating a harmonious blend of nature and architecture. I'm delighted that we can finally meet, a soft, melodic voice beckoned to us. There she sat, an embodiment of beauty. Her face possessed sharp features, her sun-kissed skin exuding a natural glow. Strands of sleek, raven-black hair cascaded gracefully down her back. Her dress, a vibrant ensemble of colorful fragments, was accentuated by feathers adorning both her hair and jewelry. Yet, beneath her captivating appearance, there lingered a tinge of sadness and concern in her voice. Indeed, responded the man standing beside her, donning a simple yet tidy white shirt and slightly worn dark trousers. His imposing stature and commanding tone suggested authority. His weathered countenance and strands of silver amidst his dark hair hinted at the wisdom that comes with the passage of time. Dirian, bowing his head, offered an apology for our perceived inadequacy. The man nodded, accepting the gesture, and then turned his gaze towards me. Uncertain of how to feel in the man's presence, I gathered that he was Manannan Mac Liar, one of the gods of this realm. His deep, dark brown eyes bore into mine with a furrowed brow. Feeling the weight of his scrutiny, I quickly averted my gaze and mimicked Dirian's respectful posture. "Oh, let us not be too hard on them," interjected the woman I guessed to be Yuna, her voice carrying a touch of melancholy. Rising gracefully from the stone bench, she addressed Liar, with a faint smile gracing her lips. "It is time for a proper introduction. I am Yuna, and this grumpy old man here is Liar. Mortals have their own ways of referring to us as gods, you know." After a moment of silence, Dirian and I raised our eyes, anticipation filling the air. Yuna took a step closer, her expression troubled yet filled with compassion. She directed her words to me, her voice gentle and soothing. "I am aware of the hardships you have endured, my dear child, and I fear that some of them may be a result of my own actions." Confusion swirled within me, but before I could voice my questions, Yuna continued, her voice tinged with regret. "When you arrived from the sky, your body and mind were in desperate need of healing. Your very mind was at risk of descending into madness. In order to protect you, I had to mend your shattered self by removing your memories." A mix of emotions washed over me, confusion, gratitude, and a touch of sadness. I struggled to comprehend what Yuna had done for me. Her words echoed in my mind, and I found solace in her genuine concern and remorse. "You see, dear child," Yuna continued, her tone gentle yet firm, "your well-being was my utmost priority. It pained me to take away your memories, but it was necessary to ensure your sanity and preserve your essence." Tears welled up in my eyes, my voice choked with emotion as I spoke to Yuna. "Dirian has shared with me the circumstances of my arrival in this realm. I am so deeply sorry for the tragedy I brought with me." The tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I gazed into Yuna's wise and compassionate eyes, seeking forgiveness and understanding. After all, she saved me after what happened because of my arrival. "But that is not your fault," Yuna immediately assured me, gently taking my hand into hers. The warmth of her touch enveloped me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief washing over me. Liar, who had been observing quietly, stepped forward. "That, we cannot say for certain," he interjected. His voice carried a tone of caution. "The mind of a creature is complex, and no being in this world can fully control it. We do not yet know if you carry guilt. Is there anything at all, that you remember?" Seeking company in Dirian's eyes, I found myself met with a quick shift of his gaze, a subtle indication that he couldn't offer the support I sought. Uncertainty gnawed at me, the fear of saying the wrong thing and potentially getting into trouble tightening its grip. Yet, I knew I had to speak, to share the fragments of memories that had resurfaced during my past nights. With a deep breath, I directed my gaze towards Liar, meeting his inquisitive eyes. "There have been a few memories that have broken through the haze," I began cautiously. "They are fragments, lacking coherence or clear meaning. Strange words and names, fleeting images of unknown places." Liar's unwavering gaze held mine, urging me to continue. I gathered my courage and pressed on. "But there is one thing that stands out. I have no recollection of Manera, the goddess you hold disdain for." A deep frown etched across Liar's face at the mention of Manera's name, his displeasure evident. His eyes darted towards Yuna, questioning her. "What is there to believe?" he retorted sharply. "This spawn of Manera has brought nothing but trouble upon us. Why should we care for her?" He shone his back to me. Yuna's voice resonated with raw emotion as she interjected. "Do not disrespect the memory of Cernenos." Her gaze remained fixed on me, her unwavering support a lifeline amidst the storm of confusion. "Is there anything else? Perhaps your name came to you along with those fragmented memories?" A mix of relief and sadness washed over me as I nodded, grateful for Yuna's understanding. Yes, I apologize for the delayed introduction. My name is Talis. That much, at least, has remained with me. At least there is something to celebrate. Yuna's smile was warm, her voice filled with sincerity. Then Talis, is there something that you would wish of M? Her question hung in the air, and I pondered for a moment before responding. I wish for nothing more than not to trouble you any further. Since I arrived, nothing but tragedy has followed in my wake. I wish it had never come to pass. Yuna's smile wavered slightly, her eyes reflecting millennia of sadness. There is no time in the life of a mortal to dwell on changing the past. Leave such matters to those of us who have time to waste, she said, her gaze turning towards Lyre. Some of us even had time to grow bitter and distant, disconnected from those to whom we are so closely bound. Lyre remained silent, offering no response to Yuna's remark. Her warm eyes shifted back to me, her gaze filled with affection. With your arrival, change has come, not despair. You are like a ripple in the stagnant waters of this world. Let us worry about what is to come. You should focus on yourself, she said, her gaze drifting lovingly towards the sapling at the center of the gazebo. Visit Corwin, immerse yourself in the ways of the people here, and find a way to be useful. That is the way to repay the debts you believe to carry. Thank you, the words escaped my lips, heartfelt but inadequate to express the depth of my gratitude. Yuna smiled once again, her gaze shifting towards Dirian. Dirian will guide you to the village. He is no stranger to these lands and the people of Corwin. Dirian bowed respectfully to Yuna, a gentle smile spreading across his face as he absorbed the warmth emanating from the goddess's words. Of course, he acknowledged. His eyes met mine, a silent reassurance that I would not be alone in this journey. With that, it seemed our conversation had reached its conclusion. Yet, there was one lingering question that had remained in the back of my mind. Despite being swept away by the presence of Yuna and Lyre, I mustered the courage to ask. If I may, without presumption, could I make a request of you? I raised my gaze to meet Yuna's eyes, and she nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. I wish to learn more about Cernunnos, the one who selflessly gave his life to save me. It is the least I can do to honor his memory. I was told that you were his closest friend. Would you be willing to share your knowledge and stories with me? A veil of sadness washed over Yuna's eyes, and her gaze briefly shifted away from mine. His departure was sudden and left a bleeding wound in my heart. I, too, am in need of healing. Your request is noble, and I accept. However, I ask for your patience as I find peace within myself. I would be honored, I replied, bowing my head respectfully. Yuna took a few steps back, and when she turned to face me again, a gentle smile graced her features. Talis, daughter of Alanoan, protégé of Cernunnos, Yuna spoke, her voice carrying a sense of authority and power. May the confines of my domain be a safe haven for you in times of need. As she uttered these words, I could feel an otherworldly energy resonating within my soul. Disapproving eyes from Lyre met Yuna's gaze, and he openly voiced his dissent. You know I disapprove of this, Lyre addressed Yuna with a tinge of annoyance in his voice. As if I couldn't see it in your eyes. This is none of your concern, Yuna replied coldly. You know that's not true, Lyre persisted, his voice growing slightly louder. We cannot afford to be impulsive. I am concerned for your... No, our safety. Can't you see that? And what good is your concern if you never take the leap? Yuna retorted, engaging in their ongoing debate. But then, she shifted her gaze back to me. Now, my dear, bid me farewell. You need not witness our bickering. I will send for you when I am ready to teach you about Cernunnos. Following Dirian's example, I once again bowed my head and turned to leave this sacred place. However, before we could make our exit, Lyre's voice halted us in our tracks. Not you, boy. We need to talk. Dirian turned back and addressed me. Wait for me outside, he suggested. I doubt you'll have to wait for long. A forced smile appeared on his lips as he anticipated the conversation ahead. I savored the peaceful moments I spent in the garden, waiting for Dirian. The serene surroundings and the gentle breeze brought a smile to my lips. Although my conversation with Yuna left me with more questions than answers, I found solace in the promise of meeting again. Lyre's hostility lingered in my mind, but I could somewhat understand his skepticism, considering what Dirian had told me. Perhaps I hadn't revealed everything I remembered, and Lyre had sensed it. Nevertheless, Yuna's acceptance was enough to make me feel safe, at least for the time being. Dirian soon joined me, and together we embarked on our journey to Corwin. We made a brief stop at the nest to gather provisions and retrieve Dirian's backpack. When I asked about its contents, he simply shrugged and mentioned that it held personal belongings. With our supplies in tow, we ventured forth into the enchanting and dense forest of Alanawan, following unmarked paths that seemed to beckon us deeper into its mysterious depths. Chapter 2. Village of Corwin. Scene 6. Unconventional welcome. It took us the better part of the day to reach Corwin. We had to make frequent stops, as I wasn't in the best condition. Despite the sweat and aches, I pressed on, following deer steps across the rolling hills of the forest floor. There was a strange sense of nostalgia that kept me going, and the deep, dark forest felt strangely like home. Dirian's light-hearted chatter made each step feel lighter, and I absorbed his knowledge about the forest and his experiences as a traveler devoted to Lyre. Navigating confidently through the maze-like paths that crisscrossed the forest, we paused for a final breather. "The daylight is fading," I remarked, taking a sip from the leather bag filled with warm, unappetizing water. "We're close. We'll make it today," Dirian reassured me with a smile as he settled comfortably on a moss-covered fallen log. "Yuna mentioned that you've been to the village before," I ventured, realizing we hadn't discussed Corwin yet. "Is it a nice place?" "It is," Dirian replied, scanning our surroundings. "Filled with friendly people. It's a small but diverse community, more so than most places." "What do you mean?" "There are all kinds of people living there. Mostly humans like me, but I believe a few elves reside there too." Satisfied with his assessment, Dirian met my gaze. "Most of them are born and raised in this forest, but for a settlement as small as Corwin, it has attracted people from all corners of the world who fell in love with Yuna and followed her here." "So I'll fit right in?" I smiled, a question in my voice, when suddenly, I heard a noise. It was faint but distant. "What?" Dirian noticed the change in my expression and asked. "I heard something." I focused on my hearing, and the sound became clearer. 4 sets of footsteps, cautiously approaching through the undergrowth of the forest. I could discern the clinking of their equipment and the shallow, focused breaths they took. "There are 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, armed, closing in on us from behind," I whispered, relaying what I had picked up. "You truly are remarkable," Dirian commented, flashing a brief smile. His calmness made me nervous. "They're still far enough away, they haven't split up yet." He mused to himself, "Talis, relax." He noticed my stern expression, sensing the readiness within me to fight and defend ourselves. "They're the wardens of Corwin. They'll try to encircle us, so we should let them." Dirian remained seated, stretching his arms. It would be impolite not to allow them to catch us. It took a few more minutes of nerve-wracking clinking and rustling until they got close enough to spring their trap on us. Emerging cautiously from their concealed positions, bows at the ready, 4 wardens encircled us. "Who are you?" The man, who exuded an air of experience, demanded, his eyes scanning us with suspicion. "Stay where you are." A commanding snarl accompanied the words, as the woman asserted her authority. Taking advantage of the pause, I carefully observed the wardens. Clad in meticulously crafted leather armor, adorned with steel studs, they presented a formidable sight. Their faces bore an edginess, prepared to release a barrage of arrows should we prove troublesome. "Remain calm, my friends," Dirian spoke with clarity and assurance, displaying his open palms. I am Dirian, a devoted traveler of Lyre. This is Talis, who has received the blessing of Una. We are allies of the gods, and we journey from the nest to Corwin. Your elders are familiar with me. Let us meet with them." A momentary silence hung in the air, broken by the leader of the wardens lowering his bow and bowing his head respectfully. "Forgive us for the aggressive welcome. I am Raiden." I studied him intently, an imposing figure with a shaved head adorned by intricate tribal tattoos snaking down his neck and arms. His piercing blue eyes contained the intensity of a gathering storm. He proceeded to introduce the others in his group. Lyria, the lone woman, possessed a lithe and agile frame, slightly shorter than myself. Feathers were delicately woven into her dark hair, and her round face displayed a mischievous grin. Kalen stood with a stoic and muscular presence, his rugged features accentuated by a closely cropped beard. Ancient runes were etched into his weathered skin, lending an air of mystery. And lastly, Silver commanded attention, his fiery red hair framing a sharp, angular face. His amber eyes flickered like smoldering embers, revealing a profound intensity. They moved with us the rest of the way to the village of Corwin. Raiden led the way, with Lyria closely behind him, and the other two wardens covered the rear, keeping me and Dirian in the middle. It took us around 30 minutes to reach the village. We moved swiftly, and nearing the end of the journey, I was panting and aching all over. Something inside me told me that this speed of travel was not exceptional. I could move much faster if I wanted to, but I found it hard to believe, feeling my legs grow weaker with every step. At last, we arrived, emerging from the thickets of the dark forest into the open clearing that housed the village. Panting heavily, I was grateful that we slowed down from a light jog to a walking pace. The entire group remained silent, except for a few quiet commands exchanged among the wardens. Even the usually chatty Dirian kept to himself, and I followed his lead, staying silent the whole way. It was their leader, Raiden, who now looked back at us. His intense blue eyes fixed on Dirian as he asked, testing him, "Welcome to Corwin. If you wish to meet with the elders, can you tell me where we should lead you?" Dirian took a moment to survey the surroundings, before responding. "It has been a few years since my last visit. I mostly spoke to Elder the Lion. I believe his house is over there." As he spoke, he pointed to one of the homes. The village lay in the clearing of the forest, gently ascending the small hill. The house he pointed to was near the center of the village, but it did not overshadow the others. However, at the mention of the name the Lion, all the wardens shifted uncomfortably. "I am sad to inform you that Elder the Lion is no longer with us," Raiden said, genuine remorse in his voice and eyes. "He fell just a few days ago, together with many others, when the star fell out of the sky, along with that damned demon." "My condolences," Dirian responded, bowing his head respectfully. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I added, bowing my head to mimic Dirian's gesture, partly to hide my watering eyes. All this tragedy was tied to me. What would the people of this place do when they learned that I was deeply entangled in all of this? With a heavy sigh, Raiden continued, "Inform the elders." He commanded the wardens, who without further questions, hurried off towards the village. "These are hard times." Raiden began walking towards the village, with us following closely behind. "We need to be careful. Only the gods know what else came from the sky with that monster." His gaze landed on me for a brief moment. Did he know about me? Panic gripped me, but before I could react, Dirian spoke up. "Let us trust in the judgment of the gods. They know better than us, after all. If they say we are safe, we should not look for danger where there is none." "I wish I could do that," Raiden chuckled softly. "The forest is in an uproar after losing its father. Ancient guardians that kept us safe have fallen or left us in remorse. These are hard times, and we have to be careful. I doubt any of the gods would disagree." Indeed, Dirian agreed, as we approached the center of the village, following Raiden into one of the larger houses that seemed to serve as a meeting hall. We didn't have to wait long before a crowd started to gather around us. As we stood in front of the meeting hall, the villagers became increasingly curious. Initially, it was just children who approached us with intrigued looks, but soon adults and elderly residents joined them. I felt a mix of nervousness and shyness, so I avoided meeting their eyes as their gazes naturally turned towards me. They whispered among themselves, their speculation running wild. We were the main attraction of the evening. Soon, the elders arrived, and we were ushered into the hall, with the doors left open so that everyone could hear. As they were introduced, I observed each of them closely. Elder Phelan, a kind-hearted gentleman with warm emerald eyes, wore elegant flowing robes adorned with patterns of leaves, indicating his connection to Cernunnos. Elder Erevan, an ancient-looking elven man with long silver hair, had a face marked by time, but his dark purple eyes exuded a sense of power and clarity that age often dulls. The last elder we met was Skylark, a woman with short, dark hair that showed signs of age. Her rotund and chubby figure radiated an incredible energy of wisdom and love. Her ever-smiling face hinted at mischief and joy. Feathers adorned her hair, and her clothes bore patterns reminiscent of birds in flight. Stepping forward with confidence, Dirian addressed the gathered elders and villagers. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Dirian, a dedicated traveler in service of Lyre. Some of you may recall my previous visit to this village. By my side stands Talis, an enchanting elven girl who has experienced the nurturing embrace of Una in the nest. Today, she has been bestowed with Una's blessing and entrusted with the sacred task of carrying the memory of Cernunnos within her." Dirian's voice resonated with a sense of reverence and purpose as he continued, "We have come to your village under the guidance of Una herself. With your gracious blessing, we seek to become a part of this community, offering our skills and knowledge to contribute to its prosperity. We will wait with reverence for the summons from the gods, ready to fulfill our duty and embrace the path they have set before us. If it is Una from whom you come, I will welcome you with open arms." Skylark, the short-haired elder, spoke immediately as Dirian completed his introductions. "I see no harm in two capable hands joining in," she continued with a bright smile. The other two elders didn't seem as enthusiastic, but they didn't appear categorically opposed to the idea. It was Raiden who spoke next, even though he wasn't one of the elders. His words carried weight in the village. "I believe there are other concerns to address as well," he said, glancing in my direction. "We all painfully remember the events of the past several days. Danger is lurking, and we do not know when something terrible may happen again. We know all too well the price we would pay if history were to repeat itself." As Raiden spoke, his words became more passionate. However, Elder Erevan gently raised his hand, signaling for Raiden to pause. Despite his frail stature, Erevan carried himself with a commanding presence. "I appreciate your enthusiasm for our safety, Raiden, but let us not speak with incomplete intent," he said. His powerful eyes then shifted directly to me. "I, too, was once considered an outsider in this village, just as you are now." He caught a faint smile from Elder Phelan before continuing. "Some still see me as such, even though I have lived here longer than most. But my point is this: do not fear to speak the truth. Tell us who you are and what brought you here. Let our troubled minds find solace in knowing your intentions." Some of us witnessed a mysterious blonde-haired woman covered in the blood of battle, falling from the sky alongside the monster that claimed so much from us. Dirian began to speak, his voice filled with a touch of hesitation. "First, I would like to reiterate that we come with the blessing of." But before he could finish his sentence, I stepped forward, interrupting him. "I understand your wariness, and perhaps even fear. If I were in your position, having experienced the losses that you have, I would feel the same. And to be completely honest, I cannot fully dispel your concerns," I said, looking directly into their eyes. Dirian's anxious gaze locked onto my face, as if he knew I was about to reveal something unexpected. "The truth is that I was the one who traveled on the falling star, crashing into this world. I arrived unconscious, and I was told that Cernunnos, along with your people, battled the demon that came with me, and I can never repay their sacrifice. Una helped mend my body, but my mind was shattered, and only fragmented pieces remain. Like a broken mirror, I cannot see much when I try to remember anything of my past, I confessed, my voice filled with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. In truth, I do not know my own history, but I can assure you that I do not wish harm upon anyone. I am here to repay those who have helped me in my time of need. I will do everything within my power to contribute and to honor the names of the fallen, I declared, my words carrying a sense of sincerity and conviction. Silence settled over the hall as the words hung in the air. The elders and the gathered villagers exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and contemplation. Finally, Elder Eravand stepped forward, his voice carrying wisdom and compassion. It takes great courage to admit what you have shared with us, Talis, he said, his gaze steady. And I do not need to hear more, let your actions speak for yourself. We didn't have to wait long before the attention turned to Elder Phalon, who held the power to decide our fate. With a slight sigh, he met my gaze directly. I choose to believe in the memory of Cernenos. He saved us all, and there must have been a reason he protected you without even knowing who you were. You now bear the weight of great expectations, and since you have received Yuna's approval, I see no harm in giving you the chance to stay. Excited chatter filled the hall as the decision was made. A wave of relief washed over me, and I exhaled the anxiety that had been building within me. Let me handle this from now on, Elder Skylark suggested to the others, who accepted without objection. She beamed with joy and exclaimed, "Welcome, Talis and Dirian." Her words were echoed by the other elders and some villagers, while a few cast disapproving glances our way. Raiden, in particular, seemed dissatisfied with my answers. I made a mental note to work on building a connection with him. Elder Skylark then approached me and Dirian, leading us out of the hall. "Welcome once again," she said with a wide smile, examining us closely. "I will show you a place where you can stay. Come with me." Leading us in the direction of the forest, away from the center of the village, she continued talking with curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "So, you had the privilege of meeting Yuna? How was she? Did you like her?" Skylark asked, her voice filled with genuine interest. "She was truly amazing, a goddess in flesh," I replied, my words conveying my admiration. The excitement in Skylark's eyes was evident. "I know, there is no one like her in the world." "Did you have the chance to hear her sing?" she inquired. "Unfortunately, not," I replied regretfully. "That's a shame, but given the circumstances, it's understandable. Come, the small house over there," she pointed to a modest building situated a distance away from the others. "You can stay there. It belonged to Maru, who sadly passed away last winter due to illness." "I'm sorry to hear that," I expressed my condolences. "Don't be. It was her time to go," Skylark said with a slightly less joyful tone. "Anyway, the house is available for you to use. It may be a bit dusty, but you'll manage." We arrived in front of the house, and Dirian inspected it with a critical eye and a slightly troubled expression. "Now, if you need anything, find me. I will do what I can to help, and that includes anyone in the village. You are here with Yuna's blessing, and I will have a lot to say to anyone who stands against that, even those two old farts. If they trouble you, come to me. I know how to handle them," Skylark assured us with a determined tone. We listened to her talk, a bit uncertain but appreciative of her support. "Thank you very much, Elder," I said, bowing my head, mirroring gesture I saw Dirian perform many times before. "Stop that," Skylark admonished with a smile in her voice. "And don't call me Elder. It makes me feel old. Sky is enough, understand?" We both nodded, feeling nurtured by Sky's presence. "Now, I'll leave you to settle in," she said, turning to leave. But then, in a moment of panic, she stopped. "Oh, do you have anything to eat? I can make you some dinner." "There's no need, we will manage," Dirian interjected, meeting my eyes before he declined the offer. "Well, if you don't have enough, come to me, and I'll whip something up for you," Sky offered warmly. With that, she left us in front of our new house. I took the initiative and opened the wooden door, which emitted a loud, high-pitched squeak. The interior of the house was small and compact, with the long, cold brick stove as the most solid fixture. Everything seemed out of place, bent, crooked, and misshaped by the lingering dampness in the air. A table with a bench sat under a boarded-up window, a few precarious chairs scattered about, and a small bed stood against the far wall. Shelves, cupboards, a large wooden chest, and a spacious closet completed the furnishings of the main room. There was a second room, which appeared to be an empty larder. "Home sweet home," Dirian commented with heavy irony in his voice as he walked in, causing the wooden floor to creak and stir up a cloud of dust as he roughly placed his backpack on the table. "It's not the best," I murmured, wide-eyed, taking in the surroundings. "I'm sorry they included you in this. You have to stop doing that." Dirian scolded me. "What?" I asked, puzzled. "You have to stop apologizing for something that is not your fault," Dirian said, his expression serious. "Sorry," I responded after a brief pause, smiling mischievously. Dirian responded with an eye roll, indicating his exasperation. Undeterred, I continued, "But seriously, I don't want us to just exist like this. Although I'm grateful for a roof over our heads, I don't want to stay in these conditions." "Same here," he agreed. "It will feel much better when we get rid of the dampness and make this place a bit more livable." Here, Dirian handed me a flint and steel along with a small package of kindling in a tiny metal case. "Start a fire, and I'll find some wood to last the night. Once we've eaten, it will already start to feel more like home." "I don't really believe you, but sure, let's give it a try," I said, smiling softly. I took the tools and made my way to the stove, ready to bring some warmth and light into our new temporary home. I struggled with the flint and steel for a few minutes before Dirian burst through the door, carrying as much firewood as he could manage. With disbelief, he took the tools from me, and within a minute, the fire was flickering in the stove. "How is it even possible to survive without knowing how to use flint and steel?" He didn't ask, still, his unspoken question was clearly evident in his eyes. "I don't know, all right?" I responded, slightly exasperated. After that, we heated the flatbread and enjoyed our meal before the next great dilemma presented itself. There was only one bed in the room. "You can have it." "I'll manage on the bench," I suggested, feeling guilty as he took care of me. "Ha," Dirian chuckled, a visible amusement dancing in his eyes. "You should take the bed. I can tell you're trying to hide it, but you're still recovering. It's only been a few days since you were on the brink of death. I can see the strain in your movements. You can barely stand. Rest is what you need the most. And, to be honest, the bed isn't much better than the bench, but it's a small improvement." His tone carried a lightness, yet I could sense the sincerity behind his words. As he spoke, I could feel a slight tremor in my legs, acknowledging the truth of his observation. "I guess you're right," I said, giving in to his reasoning. "But remember, tomorrow you'll have to find something you're terrible at, so I can return the favor." Dirian grinned mischievously. "Challenge accepted. I'm sure we'll find something like that." We both laughed, continuing with our evening activities and eventually settling down for the night. And let me tell you now, it turned out he was in for a surprise. Scene 7. The Vegetable Assassin. I bet you wouldn't be surprised if I told you I slept like a log after our day of travel. I rised with a newfound energy pulsing through me. This morning, feeling refreshed and full of enthusiasm, I embarked on an adventure to find my calling. But by lunchtime I returned to find Dirian hard at work on the most pressing repairs of the house, and my head was hanging as low as my spirits. I plopped down on the bench by the table, causing a loud thud, catching Dirian's attention. He looked up and immediately noticed the defeat in my expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, wiping his hands on a scrap of cloth and rising from the stove he was cleaning. I glanced at my hands, avoiding eye contact. "Nothing," I mumbled. "That doesn't sound right," he replied, his voice gentle and compassionate. Talk to me. What happened? Taking a seat on the chair across the table, he leaned in with curiosity. I hesitated, contemplating whether or not to share my embarrassing misadventures. Finally, I decided to give in to his warm smile. Well, I had the most terrible experience trying to help today. People are probably calling me the walking catastrophe of the village by now. Every attempt I made to lend a hand ended in spectacular disaster. Dirian's lips curved into a smile. Come on, it couldn't have been that bad. I let out a dramatic sigh. Oh, it was worse than you can imagine. First, I met this lovely old farmer named Oakley. I thought I could assist him with his vegetable plot. But within minutes, I was labeled the vegetable assassin because I managed to uproot more crops than weeds. I swear, I have the touch of a plant nemesis. Dirian burst into laughter. A vegetable assassin? That's a new one. And that's not even the worst of it, I continued, unable to hold back a grin. I decided to try my hand at some housework and ended up helping a group of ladies with their laundry. They showed me how to work the fabric, and on my second attempt, I pulled a little too hard and split the stitching on someone's shirt. Dirian's laughter filled the room. You're certainly making an impression. I took the damaged shirt to a woman named Poppy, who was handling other clothing repairs. She lent me some yarn and a needle, I said, presenting my still red and aching thumb. But she swiftly ushered me out, claiming that I would bleed out and that my stitching wasn't exactly to die for. And would you believe that even Sky, my last hope for redemption, chased me out of her kitchen, stating that she was mistaken and that the village only welcomed one pair of capable hands yesterday? I'm sorry to hear that, Dirian said, but his insincerity was evident in his smile. Oh, I'm sure you are, I retorted, my voice rising with mock indignation. A smile tugged at the corners of my lips, mirroring his. Seems like everyone got a taste of your unique talents today, Dirian chuckled, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. I joined in the laughter, my comical failures fresh in my mind. Well, it's safe to say that I have a special plan in motion to make sure I'm never asked to help with anything ever again. It seems to be working flawlessly if that's what you're truly after, Dirian replied, a hint of darkness in his tone. But he couldn't contain his amusement, and the chuckle escaped from his lips. Leaning in closer, I mimicked his tone, adding a touch of mystery. No one knows what I'm truly after, not even myself. My attempt at a cryptic remark fell flat, and we sat there quietly for a moment, the silence stretching between us. Breaking through the growing silence, I decided to lighten the mood. Hey, since my help seems to have the opposite effect, how about I lend you a hand with those repairs? We can turn this place into a disaster zone in no time. Dirian's eyes widened in mock horror. Are you sure you want to unleash your full potential on this poor house? Absolutely, but first, we should eat something, I suggested, determined to salvage the rest of the day. With that, my new plan was set. Dirian, with a weary smile, stood up and began preparing our food, making use of the assassinated vegetables I had unwittingly gathered. Scene 8. Memories beneath the stars. The day had unfolded just as one might expect. I had managed to break more things than I repaired, accidentally injuring Dirian on 2 separate occasions. First, I accidentally hit his shin with one of the floorboards I was trying to secure. Then, the entire closet came crashing down on both of us as I was attempting to clean its insides. Exhausted from our endeavors, we eventually fell asleep, but my mind continued to race. Now, sitting outside the house with a heavy, warm blanket draped over my shoulders, I gazed up at the clear night sky, seeking solace in the shimmering stars. Despite the peaceful and beautiful scene before me, my face lacked its usual smile. In this quiet moment, my thoughts ran wild, burdening me with their weight. All I wanted was to be useful. With all my heart, I yearned to find my place, perhaps here in the village of Corwin with these beautiful people. But today, all I managed to do was cause harm, destruction, and waste the kindness bestowed upon me. Perhaps my initial fears were right, fire and death seemed to follow in my footsteps, and I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for them to catch up with me. Maybe Lyre was justified in his caution and fear of me, considering my connection to the goddess of the empire. And worst of all, I didn't know, I couldn't remember much about my own past. The uncertainty terrified me, and the thought that my worst assumptions might be true sent a shiver down my spine. Pulling the blanket closer, tightening its reassuring grip, I shifted on the low bench in front of the house, causing it to emit a quiet squeak. What could I do to ease this uncertainty? The answer was clear, albeit frightening. I needed to remember. So far, my memories of the past were mere fragments, indistinct and jumbled, but even they were enough to unsettle me. Amidst the random recollections of unknown places, fantastical landscapes, and unfamiliar faces, there were a few that truly terrified me. I glimpsed fire, blood, swords, battles, and death. Part of me wished to forget, but what if those horrors were truly intertwined with my existence? What if I unknowingly brought danger to everyone around me? The thought propelled me forward, pushing through the fear as I squinted my eyes and focused on the fragments of memories I possessed, hoping to unravel Yuna's magic. However, to my surprise, the anticipated pain did not accompany this delve into my memories. Instead, I began to see more, still not much, but something. Holding the slender sword in my hand, an image formed of a bloodied figure, clad in heavy armor, blocking my path. The notion of fire conjured images of massive machines, molten steel, and searing heat. And amidst the corpses, the shadow of a monstrous creature loomed, blotting out the light. Lost in my thoughts, deep within my own mind, I failed to hear Dirian open the front door, his footsteps muffled by the grass. Only the slight movement of the bench as he sat down brought me back to reality. "Hey, couldn't sleep?" he asked softly, covering himself tightly with the blanket, mirroring my earlier actions. "You didn't come back inside, so I thought I'd join you." Apologizing for inadvertently waking him, I still felt a bit detached as I replied. Perhaps my voice carried traces of the confusing and tragic memories that flooded my mind. Dirian seemed to pick up on it. "Are you okay?" he asked, shifting a little closer. "Do you want to talk about it?" Silence enveloped us for a few moments as I raised my eyes to the sky, desperation welling up within me. I wanted to confide in him, to make sense of the memories that haunted me. Maybe he could help me find a less terrifying interpretation of what I remembered. But could I truly trust him? Could I risk revealing everything to anyone? Would he fear me and the darkness that clung to me? Glancing at him, tears welling in my eyes, I saw Dirian gazing up at the heavens, a relaxed smile gracing his lips. Once again, I succumbed to the comfort of his smile and leaned my head against his shoulder, hiding the tears that trickled down my cheeks. I was trying to remember my past. "I needed to ensure that I'm not a danger to you or anyone else," I began, my voice trembling. He gently gripped my shoulder, allowing me to lean into him fully. "I saw terrible and frightening things. I'm terrified that more of what arrived with me will follow, causing harm here. I don't want anyone to suffer anymore," I confessed, my words muffled by my crying. "Maybe," Dirian pondered, his voice laden with thought. "But tell me, are you the villain in those memories? Even if you were, I've come to know the Talis of these past few days. I know that you have no intention of causing harm to anyone. That knowledge is enough for me." He pulled me closer to his shoulder, offering a comforting embrace. "And what if you just tried to run away from that terrible and scary past you speak of? What if you're here to find your peace?" I desperately hoped that he was right, clinging to the possibility like a lifeline. Slowly, my tears subsided, and as we sat there beneath the twinkling stars, a question bubbled up inside me. Pulling back slightly from his shoulder, I looked into his eyes and asked, "Why are you so kind to me? Don't you have other things to do, besides guiding and helping me?" Dirian chuckled, but seeing the sincerity in my question, he replied, "Oh, that stings a little." His eyes returned to the mesmerizing night sky. "By nature, I'm a traveler. I never stay in one place for long, but when I do, it's because I want to be there." He turned his gaze back to me. "I'm here to experience, to learn, and to truly live. And if the gods have asked me to assist, Well, it only makes the journey that much more intriguing. He paused, his gaze softening. But let me ask you, with whom would I have a more captivating experience than with you? You've fallen from the sky, emerged from a fallen star, and in our first meeting, you received Yuna's blessing. Simply put, you are extraordinary and fascinating. I blushed at his words, trying to deflect the attention. Don't forget dangerous. How's your shin feeling? I attempted to lighten the mood, but my cheeks grew warmer. Dirian laughed. It's perfectly fine, he reassured me, readjusting the blanket on his back. It's getting quite chilly out here. We should head back inside and get some sleep. You'll need the energy to continue helping tomorrow. He emphasized the word helping with a playful tone. Sure, I retorted, playfully bumping into him. But you're right, it's getting cold. With that, we gathered our belongings and made our way back inside, settling down for a peaceful night's rest. With my mind now at ease, sleep came more easily, and I drifted off with a renewed sense of hope. Scene 9. Tea and Wisdom. The following morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose and determination. Over breakfast, Dirian and I engaged in a brief conversation, but I noticed that he seemed a bit preoccupied. When I asked him about it, he assured me that it was nothing to worry about. With my plans for the day already formed, I hurriedly set off in search of Elder Erevan. After the previous day's fruitless search for a meaningful way to contribute, I hoped that the wise elder could provide me with guidance and direction. Locating the elder was relatively easy. Farmer Oakley, who lived nearby, pointed me in the right direction after I assured him that I had no intention of meddling with his vegetables that day. Elder Erevan resided in a humble abode, a small house just slightly larger than ours. It appeared that he lived alone, and the size of the dwelling seemed more than sufficient for one person. The house had a charming low-hanging roof, and the surrounding landscape featured carefully tended small hills and rockeries adorned with vibrant, colorful flower beds. The entire area was infused with the sweet fragrance of flowers, and the air buzzed with the sound of bees going about their busy work. Approaching the house, I noticed a large open wall where bunches and bundles of various flowers and herbs were left to dry. Inside, Elder Erevan sat behind a small writing desk, quill in hand, and wearing spectacles as he diligently scribbled notes into an old book. Hello, I greeted him, hoping to capture his attention. Oh, hello, dear, he replied, not looking up from his writing. I will be with you momentarily, just let me finish this thought. I stood there, taking in the surroundings, until he finally set his quill down and turned his attention to me. There, how can I assist you? His dark purple eyes locked onto mine. I seek advice, and you, esteemed elder, appear to possess the wisdom I seek, I began, feeling a peculiar mix of nervousness and reverence in the presence of this old elf with his intense aura. Erevan chuckled softly. Do not underestimate the wisdom of the other elders. The title is not bestowed solely based on age. But, to be honest, you have chosen wisely in seeking me out, he said, winking at me with a mischievous smile. What is it that you wish to ask? Yesterday, my attempts to be helpful only led to trouble. I do not wish to repeat those mistakes, but I am uncertain of how to proceed, I explained. I heard about that, the old man chuckled, closing the weathered book and rising from his seat. Ah, the infamous vegetable assassin, they called you. Unfortunately, I confirmed, my face flushing with embarrassment. He approached me, leaning down slightly to meet my gaze, despite the slight bend in his back due to age. The question of avoiding the repetition of past mistakes is as old as creation itself, he mused, summarizing my query. I have an easy answer for you, you are young, and mistakes are an inevitable part of life. Embrace the lessons learned from yesterday to make today better. But I suspect that is not the answer you were hoping for, is it? He motioned for me to follow as he stepped into the garden in front of his house, turning to look back at me as he continued speaking. Behold this garden. It took me over 50 years to mold it into the vision I had in mind, he said, gesturing to the lush array of flowers surrounding us. See that one? He pointed to a bed of small flowers, with bell-like yellow blossoms. It wilted 3 times before I discovered the perfect spot for it to thrive. And that one, he led me to a small pond of stagnant water near the main flow of the creek running on the village's edge, where several dozen stems with pine-like shapes emerged from the mud. I had to beseech Cernunnos himself 5 times over the years for its saplings, as the water constantly swept them away. As he concluded, his gaze met mine directly. Do you grasp the essence of my words? We all stumble and fail at times. It is a natural and integral part of life. Do not be ashamed of your mistakes. Instead, learn from them, and most importantly, do not allow failure to discourage you. Aravin's enthusiasm and willingness to engage in such a profound conversation, even as I disrupted his work, left me awestruck. Despite his words not offering an immediate solution to my predicament, they left me with a renewed sense of hope and a belief in the power of learning from one's missteps. Not satisfied yet, he asked, a wide smile spreading across his face. Then listen, and keep my words deep within your being. What is it that you should do now, in this very moment? After all, that is what young souls like yours ponder, am I mistaken? Indeed, I am well aware of the wisdom in your previous words, but my current desire is to aid others, I replied earnestly. Of course, you understand that. Everyone does. But the truth remains unchanged, he responded. Then what should I do? Frustration tinged my voice. I do not possess all the answers, the old man chuckled. You are the one who knows better than I do. Let us work together to find the solution. With that, he led me back into his cozy abode, where he gestured for me to sit at the table while he prepared some tea. As I began to rise, offering to assist him, he declined, expressing concerns about scalding either of us. Just remain seated. Besides, you wouldn't know which herbs are best suited for this task. I patiently waited for a few minutes until Elder Aravin presented me with a ceramic mug brimming with steaming tea. Thank you, I expressed my gratitude. You're most welcome, he replied, settling into the seat opposite me with a contented sigh. Now, young one, let us work together. Tell me, what did you attempt yesterday? Aravin inquired, cradling his warm mug in his hands. I proceeded to recount my endeavors and failures, and he listened attentively. First and foremost, if you ever had the thought of assisting me in my garden, discard it entirely. I shall never permit anyone to meddle with it, especially not you, dear child, he stated, his warm smile providing reassurance. Based on what I've heard, you must simply persevere. Perhaps the craft of shaping materials would suit you better, or aiding the village women in gathering resources from the forest. And if you possess a keen intellect, you might even consider joining the trading caravan on their journeys to buy and sell wares. All of Aravin's suggestions intrigued me, but the mention of traveling with merchants sparked a question within me. May I ask a favor? I have not had the opportunity to explore the world beyond our village. I yearn to expand my knowledge. Would you be willing to enlighten me about the wider world? Aravin chuckled heartily. Youth rarely allows the mind to remain rooted in one place for long. I am more than willing to share what I know, he replied, a twinkle in his eyes as he savored his tea. He delved into his past, recounting his journey from the distant land of Elender, the hidden realm of the elves, to Corwin. He shared tales of encountering the ancient and powerful elven mages who are believed to rival the power of gods, as well as his experiences in the Empire, a land of ambitious men driven by the ideals of their goddess. He described the forest of Elenawen, once the realm of Cernunnos, a tranquil and vibrant sanctuary amidst the wider world. While his travels were limited, he encouraged me to seek knowledge from Dirian or even Manannan Mac Liar himself for a broader understanding of the realms beyond Corwin. As our conversation continued, I discovered more about Elder Aravin's life and experiences. His arrival in Corwin almost a century ago was driven by his thirst for knowledge of the local flora and his desire to encounter the true god of the forests, Cernunnos. He shared his transformation from arrogance to humility and how his encounters shaped his path, leading him to become the village's dedicated apothecary. Scene 10 Baskets and Bravery. After my invigorating morning chat with the elder, I set out to find my place in the village. Determined to be of help, I immersed myself in various crafts, offering my assistance to the villagers. My first encounter was with Rowan, the skilled potter in his late 40s. Together, we started on the task of purifying clay, and to our pleasant surprise, no disasters occurred. Motivated by this success, I even tried my hand at crafting a couple of teapots, though they turned out to be more of an abstract art piece than functional crockery. Thankfully, Rowan took it in stride and maintained his composure as he informed me that these will not make it into anyone's kitchen. With my hands tingling from the clay, I eagerly sought out my next craft tutor, the spirited Fern. This seasoned woman had a talent for weaving wicker baskets and had her delightful 8-year-old whirlwind of a grandchild, Thistle, as her adorable sidekick. Fern assigned us the mission of gathering materials from the forest. Thistle's boundless energy was infectious, and he led the way, asking endless questions with innocent admiration in his eyes. Hand in hand, we explored the lush woods, carefully selecting the best twigs and sticks for Fern's craft. Once we returned with our spoils, Fern kindly inspected our finds. To my disappointment, it turned out that most of what I gathered was a tad unsuitable, either too brittle, inflexible, or of uneven size. She graciously thanked me for contributing to her firewood stash and playfully scolded Thistle for not being my expert guide. Although slightly disheartened, I didn't let it dampen my spirit. In fact, I decided to join Fern in her basket weaving endeavor. With determination, I attempted to mimic her deft technique, resulting in a bucket that could only be described as charmingly eccentric. To my delight, Fern allowed me to keep it, a token of my crafting adventure. Proudly carrying my handcrafted bucket, I strolled through the village, taking in the serenity of the place. As I made my way through the village, I gathered a few groceries, eager to share a satisfying lunch with Dirian. It was then that a sound carried in the breezy wind caught my ear and piqued my interest. Following it, holding my basket full of groceries with pride, I soon found myself at the edge of the forest once again. There she was, one of the wardens, Lyria, immersed in her bow practice. With deadly precision, she swiftly shot arrow after arrow, hitting 3 target dummies distanced nearly 200 feet from her. Enchanted by her display of skill, I approached her, captivated by the grace of her movements. Lost in her concentration, she didn't notice me even as I stood just a few feet away. And then, the inevitable happened, the bucket gave way, and the groceries it held spilled to the ground, rolling in all directions. Caught by surprise and disappointment, I let out a dismayed scream as I scrambled to catch them. My sudden outburst, of course, startled Lyria, and she turned to me with a look of terror. "I'm so sorry." I defended myself, trying to calm her down. "I didn't mean to scream at you. It's just this basket, I thought it was perfect." "What are you doing here?" Lyria asked the only logical question, gradually calming down. "How did you get so close to me?" "I was simply admiring your form, you're truly skilled with a bow, and it drew me closer," I explained, feeling disheartened by the mishap with the basket as I dropped it to the ground. Lyria's expression turned slightly amused, and she came over to help me gather the spilled uncooked lunch. "No, I'm sorry." Lyria put down the bow after a second of thought and joined me on the ground to help contain the disaster. "And thank you for the compliment, I don't get those often." She opened up to me a bit. "How so?" My hands paused in motion. "You were doing great, the distance, accuracy, switching of the targets, you're an amazing sharpshooter." "Master Raiden doesn't see it that way," she said with a sigh and a sad smile on her lips. "I hope to one day be as good as he is." She placed the large potato into the broken basket lying on the ground, pausing as a thought occurred to her. "Do you have any practice with a bow? Grandpa always said that you elves are naturally gifted in magic and archery." She looked at me curiously. "I don't remember." After a brief pause, locking my eyes with hers, I answered truthfully. "I wish I did, but I barely remember my name." "Well, then try." She stood up and handed me the bow and 2 arrows she hadn't used yet. Here. A nervous smile appeared on my lips. I wasn't sure I wanted to try. Deep inside, I hoped that those fractured memories I saw were not mine, that the weapon wouldn't feel right in my hand, and suddenly, I was terrified. I don't think I should. Slowly standing up from the ground, I stepped away. Why not? Lyria smiled warmly at me. I heard that you're trying to be useful. This may be your chance to find something. You may be right, but still. I didn't finish my thought. In that moment, we both noticed Dirian approaching, speaking to us. Ah, Talis, here you are. I was looking for you. Taking him as a godsend from this situation, I quickly turned to him. What do you need? I gathered something for lunch, but you see my bucket failed me. My words trailed off, as I could clearly see that he was approaching us with a purpose. Did something happen? I asked immediately. No, he answered clearly. I just need to talk to you. He sighed. I just can't go on like this. After our chat yesterday, I need to tell you something. With these words, he took the bow and arrows from confused Lyria. This is perfect, he commented. What? I was quite mystified as well. You see, I was forbidden by that paranoid geezer to tell you. He sighed and looked directly into my eyes with a glimpse of guilt. I know a bit more about your past than you seem to know. Here, take this. He pushed the bow into my hands, and I had no choice but to accept it. I just couldn't stand idly by after seeing you like that yesterday. You deserve to know all you can, and if he thinks you're a threat to anyone, he would have to deal with Yuna first. Are you talking about Liar? I asked, still confused. Of course. Dirian continued, grabbing me by my shoulders and turning me to the position to take a shot at the dummies. Lyria audibly gasped in astonishment as she listened to Dirian's words. You, Talis, are a warrior, and a very capable one. He said with a clear voice, looking directly into my eyes. You came here with that demon, that is true, but I believe that without your help, we all would be dead. You see, that monster was already hurt, very hurt. It was at its limit, and it took all those warriors of Corwin, defenders of the Elenavan, and 2 of the gods, to finally take it down. From what I heard, you are probably the one who nearly killed the monster, others just took it down as it was on its last legs. Lyria's eyes widened in disbelief as she listened to Dirian's words. Why are you telling me all this? I was panicking. Those are the worst possible outcomes of what I was thinking. My heart pounded, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I don't believe you. I had to tell you this because I couldn't bear to see you suffer. You deserve to find yourself, and I won't lie to you or let your potential go to waste. Dirian's voice grew more intense, and I could see the determination in his eyes. I don't want to. I'm scared. Desperation surged through me, and I practically screamed at him. Pushing him away, I turned my back, the bow slipping from my grasp. I fought back the tears welling in my eyes. I'm sorry, Talis. I truly believe this will help you remember. Dirian's words faltered as he broke the heavy silence after my outburst. I know. I tried to regain my composure, my back still turned to Dirian and Lyria. I could hear one of them picking up the dropped bow. They must have thought I was going crazy. It felt overwhelming. When I held the bow, I could sense that it fit my hand perfectly. I knew that it was a good bow. I didn't want to know that. What could it mean? Do you fear your past so much that you're resisting the memories? Dirian's tone softened, trying to reach me on a more empathetic level. No, that's not it. I turned back to face him. I don't fear my past, it can't hurt anyone. I fear what I might discover about myself. Oh, Talis. Dirian's reply was immediate, a warm smile gracing his lips. Isn't that just irrational? I know you, there's nothing to fear from you. But. I attempted to voice my doubts, but he interrupted me. If you don't believe me, then believe in yourself. Dirian said softly, stepping closer. He gently picked up my hand and guided it to my chest. Feel it beating. Is that a hearth of a monster? Would you harm anyone in the village? Of course not. I sighed, looking into his eyes. He was earnest, and I began to feel a glimmer of hope. Then what's the worst that could happen? A few terrible memories? I hesitated, grappling with his words. And if that's still not enough? His tone softened further, realizing my uncertainty. Think of this as an opportunity to help the village. Capable wardens and hunters are always needed. Trust me, everyone is willing to take the risk. Haha. I managed a weak laugh, still holding back tears. Fine, but don't blame me if I turn into a crazed maniac that eats babies. I tried to inject some humor into the situation, but inside, I was still battling with conflicting emotions. Maybe I didn't want to remember, perhaps this was not a good idea. Taking the bow from Lyria, who still seemed a bit bewildered, I turned to face the training dummies with wavering determination. Chapter 3. Beyond the Horizons. Scene 11. Rising to the Call. The morning sun ascended over Arvina, casting its radiant glow upon the wide cobbled streets, bustling with people. Among those moving through the city was Knight Captain Rosalia Marcella Corvinus. Rose strode purposefully towards the personal abode of her commanding officer, Tribune Marcus Valerius. Her breakfast at the barracks had been interrupted by an urgent summons, a mild annoyance, but her spirits remained high. She held hopes for an intriguing assignment, a welcome departure from the monotonous months she had spent stationed in Arvina. Yet, cautious not to raise her expectations too high, Rose was well aware of the tranquil nature of this empire region and the strained relationship she shared with Tribune Marcus, who seemed to relish opportunities to make her suffer. Soon, Rose arrived at the mansion. The main gate swung open, and she was granted entry with a half-hearted salute from the guards. If time permitted, she would have reprimanded these apathetic legionaries for their negligence. Clad in lightweight leather armor with reinforced chain mail in strategic places, her steps weren't the quietest, and her armor emitted a faint rattle. Yet, another guard stationed near her destination failed to notice her approach, caught an idle conversation with a female scribe. "Caius, do your damn job." Rose's voice was sharp as she addressed the legionary by name, a result of the limited personnel in the local garrison, a mere 200 strong. "The tribune summoned me urgently," she continued, a hint of annoyance tinging her voice. She was aware of the precarious nature of disciplining legionaries, given her past run-ins with Tribune Marcus. Still, as a tall woman with a muscular build and an intense gaze, Rose's mere presence was enough to jolt Caius to his feet, snapping him into an immediate salute. "Of course, madam. Please follow me." Caius quickly adjusted his stance, leading Rose towards the room she sought. Soon, they arrived in a large room filled with shelves bearing various papers, scrolls, and tablets. There, a man sat behind a table. However, this man wasn't the tribune, he was Maximus Corvus, the head scribe of the local garrison. Maximus, a veteran of the Legion now relegated to administrative duties due to his age and injuries, had a robust build and displayed a scar that snaked along his neck, a testament to his days on the battlefield. Rose admired him for his unwavering work ethic and unyielding dedication. "Ah, welcome," Maximus greeted, his voice warm yet his eyes betraying an icy demeanor. He gestured towards the door. "Caius, return to your post. I'll take it from here." Caius saluted and departed, leaving Rose alone with Maximus. "How have you been?" Rose inquired, her tone softer now as she relaxed in his presence. "And how's Octavia?" Maximus's expression immediately brightened, his eyes dancing with life. "Octavia's doing well, thank you. And I'm quite content too, but we'll have to catch up later." He grunted slightly as he stood up from behind the large desk, using a crutch for support as he approached Rose. "Tribune wants to see you," Maximus informed her, his voice hushed and hurried. "And considering his disposition towards you, this could be challenging. He's in a foul mood today, so be careful." I'll be fine, Rose replied, appreciating Maximus's candid warning. I'm sure you will, Maximus chuckled lightly, motioning for Rose to follow him as he led her to the door that led to the Tribune's workspace. By the way, did you witness the falling star last night? He inquired as they walked. Yes, I did. It was rather terrifying to watch it streak across the sky above the city. The sound it produced was haunting, Rose confessed, a genuine note of concern in her voice. Did the prospect of adventure not entice you? Maximus gave her an understanding glance, and Rose simply smiled in response as they reached the door. Maximus knocked loudly and entered the room, disappearing from Rose's sight for a moment. He reappeared shortly after. He's ready to see you now. Thank you, Rose acknowledged, her stance straightening as she prepared to face Tribune Marcus. Pushing open the door, she entered a lavishly appointed room. A large window stood open, revealing a small balcony where light drapes danced in the morning breeze. Behind a massive table, strewn with books, scrolls, wax tablets, and papers sat Tribune Marcus Valerius. Tall and lean with a dark complexion, his receding hair was rumored to possess an unnaturally black hue. As he rose from his chair to face Rose, his cold gaze met hers. Maximus's warning seemed all the more pertinent, the Tribune was indeed in a foul mood. So you've finally decided to grace us with your presence? Tribune Marcus's voice dripped with venom. Sir? Rose's confusion was evident, she had arrived promptly, and he had to be aware of that. Ah, you see, I've been looking for you since the middle of the night. It's a challenge to locate you, but we'll discuss that later. As he spoke, Tribune Marcus picked up one of the wax tablets. I don't understand, sir. I arrived as soon as I received your summons, Rose retorted, her brow furrowing. The Tribune responded with a thin smile, the intent behind his words unmistakable. Is that so? Then how is it that no messenger I dispatched managed to locate you in a reasonable timeframe? Rose was at a loss for words. Confusion gave way to frustration and, in a matter of seconds, her anger simmered beneath the surface. Tribune Marcus was accusing her of neglect, a baseless claim that ignited her ire. But discipline prevailed, she had to remain composed, despite the torrent of emotions. It doesn't matter now. This will be addressed in due time. We have pressing matters to attend to, Tribune Marcus said, his gaze shifting back to the wax tablet. With a sigh laced with irritation, he looked up from the tablet. We've received orders from the legate. You are to assemble your elite knights and assist the champion of Minara in his endeavors. He glanced at the text on the tablet before returning his gaze to Rose. An insincere smile played on his lips. The details are scant, you and your knights are to rendezvous with a contact at Copia. They will provide further instructions. You are to meet them tomorrow at noon. Rose's mind raced to process the sudden turn of events. She had been handed a mission of paramount importance. The cooperation between the Legion and the Church's Templar Knights indicated urgency. Yet, a logistical challenge loomed before her. How was she supposed to reach the village of Copia within a mere day and a half? Even the swiftest couriers carrying crucial messages required 2 days for such a journey. Was Tribune Marcus setting her up for failure? Her thoughts churned, but before she could voice her concerns, Marcus dismissed her. Maximus will provide you with written orders shortly. You're dismissed for now. Understood, sir. Rose saluted crisply and exited the room, the weight of the unfolding mission and her lingering frustration swirling within her. Scene 12, Goblet of Lightning. The sun had long since risen over the bustling village of Copia, casting its relentless heat upon the wide, dusty roads. As noon approached, many locals sought refuge from the scorching sun, seeking solace in shaded corners. Amidst this backdrop, 6 weary figures made their entrance into the village, the rhythmic clattering of hooves punctuating the air. Curious gazes turned to the unexpected visitors, 5 of whom bore the insignia of the Knights of the Legion. Yet, any air of prestige they might have carried was overshadowed by the weariness etched onto their faces and the palpable tension that simmered beneath the surface. The sixth figures, dressed as a courier of the Legion, rode alongside them. The horses, once sleek and powerful, now moved with a weariness that mirrored that of their riders, each step a testament to the arduous journey they had undertaken. Heads lowered, they pressed forward, their destination an inn nestled within the village's heart. At the head of this procession rode a woman of imposing stature, her expression resolute, Rose, the knight captain. Beside her, Cassian held his position, a seasoned veteran whose graying temples spoke of his years of service. His eyes carried the weight of unspoken thoughts, while his face mirrored the determination of his leader. Like most of the others, he towed a second horse that, among the array of equipment and supplies, also carried the weight of a massive greatsword. On the other side of Rose rode the youngest of the group, her fiery red hair dampened with sweat, and her face, adorned with tiny scars from both battles and training, displayed deep contemplation. Augustina, a warrior versed in both martial and magical arts, embodied the dual role she played. Among the mages of the Legion, most leaned towards restoration magic, and Augustina was no exception. Her mastery had earned her the title of Viviatrix of the Legion. Trailing closely behind, Marcellus and Atticus rode side by side, their presence a study in contrasts. Marcellus, sharing Rose's age, had spent his early years as a recruit alongside her. However, his gaze bore a sharp intensity fixed upon Rose's back, his emotions hidden behind a veneer of focus. His dark brown hair, slightly longer than regulation, framed his face with a rebellious air that mirrored his personality. On the other hand, Atticus, positioned in the middle of his years between Cassian and Rose, embodied the epitome of the ideal legionnaire. His sturdy, barrel-like build, coupled with the meticulous care he bestowed upon his heavy shield and neatly maintained short sword, painted a portrait of controlled lethality. Closing in on the inn, Rose inadvertently checked the signboard, "Goblet of Plenty." They had indeed reached the right place. The knights stopped, and the steady rhythm of 6 sets of heavy footfalls mingled with the dust of the road they had trodden. While the others engaged in relieved chatter, Rose made a beeline for the interior. The well-being of the tired horses was left to the care of her comrades, for Rose's priority was to ascertain whether they had indeed reached their destination in time. As her eyes adjusted to the dimmer light indoors, they scanned the room for any figure that might fit the description of the contact she was here to meet. Not spotting anyone matching the description, she approached an older gentleman who appeared to be in charge of the establishment. Despite his shorter stature, his apron bore the marks of use, and his sweaty face registered immediate focus as Rose neared. "Esteemed knight, welcome. How may I be of service?" The words tumbled from his lips with an almost exaggerated enthusiasm, paired with a wide smile. Acknowledging his welcome with a nod, Rose wasted no time on pleasantries. "Has anyone inquired about the arrival of knights from Arvina?" Her inquiry was spoken loud enough for most of the patrons in the inn to overhear. A brief pause hung in the air, shifting the innkeeper's initial confusion into a rehearsed denial that bordered on theatrical. "I regret to inform you that no recent patrons have sought the assistance of knights, especially not from Arvina." Sighing inwardly at the lack of information, Rose's impatience grew. "Then arrange for hot food and cold drinks. Lunch for 6, she decided after a moment's contemplation. And ensure there's enough for our horses too. Can you manage the stables?" "As you wish. The stables are located behind the building. Lead your horses there, and we'll take care of them," the innkeeper responded, his enthusiasm seemingly undiminished. With that, Rose turned and rubbed her eyes as she exited the inn, her exhaustion momentarily catching up to her. Though drained and weary after over 30 hours without sleep, and having ridden tirelessly with only brief pauses for horse changes and respite, they had made it to their destination in time. The contact, however, had yet to make an appearance. Despite her fatigue, Rose made an effort to maintain her composure as she joined the rest of her knights outside. Seeing her companions tending to the horses, her attention was drawn to Marcellus and Livius. Marcellus was engaged in conversation with the young courier that Maximus had assigned to assist them on their journey. A sense of affinity for Livius had grown within Rose throughout the trip. Observing their interaction, she noticed Marcellus handing the reins of his horse to Livius. "What are you doing, Marcellus?" Rose's voice held an unmistakable tone of authority, and her gaze shifted to the courier, who appeared slightly flustered in the face of the knight's assertion. "Why not let Livius handle the horses?" Marcellus argued, attempting to justify his decision. "His role in this is complete. We, on the other hand, need to rest. One more word, and I will volunteer you as stable help for the remainder of the day to the inn's owner," Rose declared firmly, her patience thin as she maintained her unyielding stare. "But we have to meet the contact." "Time is crucial," Marcellus attempted to counter, but before he could finish, Cassian, the eldest among them, intervened with a voice that carried both authority and experience. "Do as you're told, Marcellus, and for Menera's sake, shut up. Both of you, keep your tongues in check, or I will have you demoted to legionaries." Rose's temper flared as she sternly addressed the squabbling knights. "Is this the behavior worthy of members of the Empire's noble knighthood?" "No, Knight Captain." Both men saluted and responded in perfect unison, their obedience immediate as they absorbed Rose's stern words. "Dismissed," Rose commanded with a flick of her hand, pointing to the wide gate, slightly ajar, leading to the inn stables. As her knights vanished behind the gate, she let out a frustrated sigh of fatigue. She then gathered her own horses, preparing to lead them to the stables. After just a few moments, the knights completed the unloading of their horses, leaving the remaining work for the stable hands. With the prospect of a well-deserved break, warm food, and a bit of rest, despite their weariness, the knights eased into a moment of respite. Tired smiles and blissful sighs played across their faces as they found seats at a large table within the inn. Rose, accompanied by Cassian, entered the inn's interior last. In this moment, she allowed a rare break in her stern demeanor, revealing a contained smile as she finally took her seat. The scent of cooked food and the comforting ambience of the inn's interior seemed to lift a weight from their shoulders. Before long, plates of food arrived, filling the air with inviting aromas. As they began to eat, the knights' quiet chatter escalated into friendly banter. Rose chose not to participate actively, instead observing her companions with a subtle sense of contentment. Amidst the shared laughter and the clinking of utensils, a sudden shiver ran down Rose's back. The sensation was familiar, her special training enabled her to sense the presence of magic. Her gaze locked onto Augustina's, and a silent understanding passed between them. Something was amiss, and their respite might be short-lived. "Where is it coming from?" Rose asked Augustina tensely, acknowledging her expertise in magic. "Can't pinpoint it, it's all around," Augustina replied, scanning the room. Cassius and Marcellus quickly grasped the gravity of Rose's concern. Atticus placed his hand on his weapon's hilt, ready for whatever might come. The once chatty atmosphere transformed into tense silence as both female knights rose from their seats, moving about the room to identify the source of the magic. In mere moments, surprised voices echoed from outside. Rose sprang into action, bursting through the door to assess the situation. The origin of the magic was evident. People were gazing skyward, pointing and exclaiming in awe. Far to the east, near the horizon, the body of Menera, crafted from pure light, hung over the capital, Augustalis, and the surrounding lands. This was a familiar sight. Yet, what captured attention was a streak of light, like lightning in the clear sky, hurtling at remarkable speed from the east. Just before the city, it abruptly deviated from its projected path and struck the ground. A thunderous boom soon followed, shaking the village and catching its residents off guard. Although Rose couldn't discern the precise point of impact, she assumed it was just outside the village. "What in Menera's name is happening?" Marcellus exclaimed, joining Rose. "Get the horses, we ride at once." Rose made a split-second decision, sprinting towards the gate and leading her knights to the stables. She hoped this might be the contact she was meant to meet, but uncertainty gnawed at her. "Arm yourselves, the village may be under attack." She issued orders as she readied her own horse. "But do not engage without orders." "Understood, everyone?" Seriously? Marcellus protested, reluctantly complying. As Rose mounted her horse, ignoring her subordinates' grumbling, she waited for everyone to prepare. After a few complaints about sore muscles, the knights emerged onto the street. In less than a minute, they departed Copia. In the open expanse, locating the lightning's point of impact proved swift. A small crowd had already gathered, a relief, as the incident didn't appear to pose an immediate threat. Drawing nearer, Rose saw that the villagers had managed to contain the small fires that had sparked. In Copia, encircled by expansive fields of wheat, even minor fires posed great danger. As the knights approached, they slowed to a walking pace. Rose was closing in on two distinct groups, the legionnaires assigned to the village and two unfamiliar figures. A bald, swarthy man, adorned in robust attire, clutched a gleaming silver staff. Beside him, a younger figure, likely a teenager, wore a worn yet stylish ensemble of leather armor. This person's head remained shrouded in a deep hood, and the gloves they wore boasted brass knuckles. "I won't ask again, identify yourselves." Rose overheard a frightened legionnaire, trying to command authority. She recognized the legionnaire's voice. Copia fell under Arvina's jurisdiction, and its stationed legionnaires surely knew the town well. "Take me to the plentiful cup," the bald man retorted, dismissive of the legionnaire's question. "By Menera's grace, I'll apprehend you for questioning if you don't explain what's happening." The young legionnaire's panic was palpable. The situation spiraled out of control. The imposing couple's appearance and the villagers' growing agitation made for a volatile mix. The legionnaire signaled to three comrades, who cautiously approached the duo, with weapons drawn. The bald man appeared ready to speak, but paused as the knights drew near. Rose's arrival defused the tension, and he held his words, waiting for her approach. The crowd parted, allowing Rose and her knights to draw closer. Remaining mounted, Rose stopped beside the legionnaires. "Talis, stand down." "I'll handle this," she ordered with icy professionalism, her horse standing tall. "Understood, Knight Captain." Talis and his men saluted, stepping aside. "I'm Rosalia Marcella Corvinus, Knight Captain of the 8th Legion," Rose introduced herself, addressing the bald man and the cloaked figure. "State your names and purpose." The man maintained eye contact throughout Rose's introduction, but when she pressed him for answers, he scanned his surroundings. With a multitude of curious onlookers, eager to glean information, the situation grew more complex. "Tisk," Rose clicked her tongue in annoyance. She had a good idea of what was transpiring. "Disperse immediately," she commanded, her voice carrying authoritative weight. Her stern gaze silenced those who hesitated. "Talis, ensure the people return to their tasks, including you and your men." She pivoted to the legionnaire, who saluted and began guiding the villagers back to their routines. Within moments, the area cleared. Rose dismounted from her horse, suppressing any signs of fatigue or pain. "Now, perhaps you can introduce yourselves," she began, adopting a more approachable yet still professional tone. "Yes, this is better," the man agreed, adopting a tone akin to Rose's. "I am Archmage Viralter of Arcanum Academics," he declared, pride evident in his name and title. "And this is my daughter and senior apprentice of Arcanum Academics." His voice grew more elated as he introduced the young figure beside him. "I'm not your daughter, Sean," Mai retorted, her tone far from compliant. "Must you always call me that?" Despite her youth, her voice conveyed authority and defiance. "We're here to meet a knight from Arvina at the Cup of Prosperity, was it?" Sean continued, ignoring Mai's objections. "Goblet of Plenty," Mai corrected, her annoyance tangible. "That's the one," Sean affirmed. "And I believe you are the one we're here to meet, Knight Captain," he added, turning his attention back to Rose. "You have indeed," Rose nodded, extending her hand for a shake, only to be met with emptiness. "My beliefs caution against unnecessary physical contact," Sean explained, his hand conspicuously absent. Mai averted her gaze, crossing her arms defensively. After a brief, seemingly interminable silence, Rose retrieved her hand, a hint of embarrassment coloring her features. She turned to her horse, gripping its reins. "Well, it seems we've left the innkeeper hanging and our meal unpaid for. I wouldn't want our reputation to tarnish over a meal," she quipped. "Shall we?" With a nod, she motioned for Sean and Mai to follow the knights and led the way to the Goblet of Plenty. The journey to the Goblet of Plenty was swift for the knights, the Archmage, and his apprentice. The weary knights continued their meal while Rose, Sean, and Mike gathered to discuss their task. A weighty atmosphere settled around the table. Sean sat with an air of pride, his back straight and head held high, while Mai adopted a defiant pose, arms and legs crossed. Though accustomed to conversing with higher-ups, even some of the Praetorian sentinels, Rose found a unique aura of arrogance in Dirian. Uncertain of how to approach the Archmage, she chose her words carefully. "I am once again Knight Captain Rosalia Marcella Corvinus. It is an honor to work with someone of your esteem. Would you care to join us for the meal, or shall we get straight to the point?" Rose initiated diplomatically, offering a thin smile. This approach wasn't quite natural for her, but she understood the need for caution when dealing with figures of such importance. "Let's address the task at hand. Mai, may you pass the tablet?" Sean interjected after hearing Rose's inquiry, gesturing toward his apprentice. "Sure." Mai delved into one of her many armor pockets, retrieving a thin stone tablet with a slight struggle. "But I'd prefer to eat first." She glanced at Sean, placing the tablet before him instead of reaching for Rose's outstretched hand. "We have work to do." "We'll eat after our discussion," Sean responded without glancing at Mai, taking the tablet from the table and handing it to the knight captain. "Maybe you will," Mai retorted with a rebellious scoff. She stood up and headed toward the innkeeper. "Besides, Eldrick mentioned that the Templars and Legion will cover everything." In the meantime, Rose quickly examined the stone tablet she had received. She could sense its magical essence, and arcane symbols etched into the frame confirmed its nature. The tablet's face was adorned with text, and upon a cursory glance, it seemed to contain specific instructions for her assignment. A signature at the end caught her attention, in the name of the divine champion of Manera, Aurelius Quintus Tiberio, Legate Gaius Flavianus Tiberian. "I was tasked with delivering this to you. The tablet possesses magical functionality. If you turn it over," Sean indicated for Rose to flip the tablet, "you can write here, and the person with the matching tablet will instantly receive your report, just as you can read the text on the front side." Sean explained. Rose had heard of this magical technology, though she only understood it theoretically. These tablets were immensely useful, yet their magic would eventually fade after a few months. Their production was also quite expensive. After her initial surprise, she slowly nodded her head. It made sense, given that the mission was sanctioned by Menera's champion. She then turned the tablet back over and began to read her orders more thoroughly. In summary, Arcanum Academics has been commissioned by Aurelius to locate and investigate the falling star from a few nights ago. Sean continued speaking as Rose delved into the orders. His face exhibited a hint of irritation as he noticed Rose not fully focused on him. "You are to assist us in our journey to Nimrith, a forest to the west where we anticipate the star has landed. Can you wait a moment?" Rose met Sean's gaze as he was about to continue. "I don't see anything here about us assisting you." Rose confronted the Archmage with this observation. In fact, her reading of the orders indicated that he was meant to assist her and her team. While Sean summarized other aspects accurately, she couldn't let this discrepancy pass. "That's not important," Sean calmly countered, making space for Mai to return to her seat. Mai carried a plate of food she had received from the innkeeper, sitting down and finally removing her deep hood to reveal her face. Her features complemented her lean figure, sharp and defined, with short and slightly unkempt deep black hair framing her face. Though her brown eyes gleamed, what caught everyone's attention were the aged scars that marred the left side of her face and neck. Yet, she displayed no interest in concealing them. Instead, she audaciously and amusedly observed the conflict brewing between Rose and Sean, all while preparing to enjoy her meal. "I can't agree," Rose stood her ground, not allowing Sean to change the subject. "My orders are specific, and I can't let this go unmentioned." Speaking with cold professionalism, Rose mirrored Sean's posture. "In fact, you're supposed to aid me in locating the site. And by the authority of the Legion, I won't allow anything to hinder us." "I won't discuss this with you now." Sean attempted to match Rose's tone, but anger inevitably seeped into his words. "I am the Archmage of Arcanum Academics. If you can't use common sense to see that I'm far more fitting to decide the course of our actions." He paused, gathering himself, then resumed, "Forgive this imperfection on my part." After a heavy sigh, he continued, "Let's postpone this discussion for later. For now, we will work together." A brief silence followed, during which Rose contemplated her next move. Eventually, she nodded, seizing the opportunity of her position, and inquired, "But first, before we discuss our next steps, I'd like to know about the magic you used to arrive here in Copia." "Regrettably, that's a closely guarded secret of Arcanum Academics, only divulged for missions of utmost importance." "I trust you won't needlessly flaunt this information." Sean reclined slightly in his seat, studying Rose closely. "Understood." Rose decided to honor the request. She was determined to collaborate with the somewhat insufferable Archmage. After all, it would only serve her mission's interests. This small concession might pave the way for future cooperation. Each knight acknowledged her directive. Satisfied, Rose turned her attention back to the mages. "Now, before we plan to fulfill our duty, we should familiarize ourselves with each other's strengths. Could you share your expertise?" "Certainly." Sean's smile widened as he leaned forward slightly. "I specialize in magic at its fundamental level, a blend of natural magic and mana, synergized with my personal reserves. This minimizes transmission inaccuracies and power losses. My studies focus on refining the flow and rectifying flaws in prevailing magical constructs. Should you find yourself in Augustalis, I hold lectures. I invite you to consider attending." Rose wasn't entirely satisfied with Sean's response, and her gaze shifted subtly to Mai. Throughout the exchange, Mai maintained an amused smile, engrossed in her meal. When Sean suggested attending his lectures, Mai silently mouthed, "Don't," her expression playfully feigning terror. "I don't mean to belittle your achievements," Rose interjected as Sean prepared to continue, "but from what I've gathered, you're more of a researcher than—" She struggled momentarily for the right words, "Well, than someone ready to confront the dangers of Nimrith Forest." "It may indeed appear that way," Sean's proud smile persisted. "Yet, I assure you, my research has led to significant advancements in magical understanding and consequently, great power. I understand your skepticism. After all, many archmages are mere professors, students of magic and instructors at Arcanum. But trust me, I've seen my share of battles." Rose scrutinized the archmage's confident facade, finding no reason to doubt the man. "I'm looking forward to working with you." Then, she acknowledged him, her gaze steady, before shifting her attention to his supposed daughter and apprentice, Mai. "And if I may, what is your specialty?" Rose's reluctance to work with the girl was palpable, a sentiment that had been growing since their first encounter. The only thing lending credence to Mai's capabilities was her title as senior apprentice of Arcanum Academics. Mai stared back at Rose, a slow, deliberate chew of bread punctuating the silence. "Mai," Sean's intervention was a gentle command, "answer her." "Why should I?" "I don't wanna." Mai's retort carried an air of defiance, as if Rose's question held no relevance. "Then you won't be joining us." Rose's tone remained unyielding, her resolve unwavering. "We don't need a bratty kid tagging along." "Wait." Sean's voice shifted, taking on a serious edge. "She will be extremely useful, and she will follow instructions." A momentary pause, then he turned directly to Mai, his gaze holding weight. "Am I right?" "Sure." Mai's response was accompanied by a languid lean back in her chair, her gaze locked onto Rose with a mix of challenge and nonchalance. "I'll handle anything that needs taking care of." My. Shan's single word was an explosion of anger, his clenched teeth revealing his struggle to maintain composure. We will discuss this later. What? Mai's patience snapped, her frustration echoing in the room as she stood with dramatic flair. The chair beneath her crashed to the floor, a noisy punctuation mark to her defiance. I already said I don't want to be a part of this if these people are. Mind your context. Shan's tone, now raised and forceful, cut through the air like a blade. He rose from his seat, his imposing figure towering over the young girl, his words carrying a weight that demanded attention. Go, collect yourself, and return. Amid the silence that followed Mai's outburst, she shot defiant glances at both Sean and Rose before storming out of the inn. The room's collective gaze shifted to the knight's table, where the archmage retrieved the fallen chair and resumed his seat, his actions a show of restraint in contrast to the emotional turbulence that had just unfolded. If you're contemplating leaving Mai behind, his words were measured, directed at Rose, do so with careful consideration. She is my daughter. We will go together, or not at all. However, rest assured, she will be an asset, and she will abide by our instructions. And if doubt remains, know this, any trouble she causes will be my responsibility. That's. Rose's response wavered, her thoughts wrestling with the weight of the situation. All right, but let's be clear, it's a temporary arrangement. Until we're facing real danger, I'll tolerate this. But as we step into Nimrith, there's no room for this behavior. Sort out any lingering issues before then. For the first time, one of the knights interjected in the conversation. If I might ask, Augustina turned her gaze toward Sean, why does she deny being your daughter? As soon as the question left her lips, Rose shot a reprimanding glance at her subordinate. Augustina's inquiry was quite blunt and somewhat impolite. However, Rose understood that it wasn't ill-intentioned and arose from genuine curiosity. Oh, this little matter. Sean didn't appear to take offense at the question. Instead, he responded with a nostalgic smile. I do consider her my daughter, even though our bond isn't bound by blood. She had a challenging upbringing, and I'm attempting to compensate for that. As you've observed, she maintains a loner facade and denies any connection with me. Yet, if you take the time to truly get to know her and don't let her aloof demeanor deter you, you'll discover an exceptional young woman beneath that exterior. Shan's tone shifted as he spoke about Mai, conveying a sense of paternal warmth. Regarding her role in this mission, I believe it's time to shed light on some of her capabilities. He turned his attention to Rose, adopting a more professional demeanor. She's nearly mastered the art of ward magic. By combining my research with her impressive wellspring of magical energy, she's capable of achieving remarkable feats. Her magic is swift, demanding no incantations. Moreover, she can effortlessly juggle multiple spells at once. From my assessment, she's on track to become one of the most, if not the most, proficient mages from Arcanum academics in terms of battle prowess. Genuine intrigue flickered within Rose as she absorbed the shared information. It was undeniable that incantationless magic posed a unique danger, and Mai's use of wards, symbols, and runic texts, each carrying magical essence akin to incantations, marked her as an uncommon mage. If only Mai displayed more emotional stability and a less defiant attitude, Rose might have readily agreed with Shan's assessment of her value. With the decision made, Rose gave an almost imperceptible nod, her thoughts running deep. Alongside her knights and the two mages from Arcanum academics, they stood poised to venture into the heart of the Nimrith forest, resolute in carrying out their duty. We'll take an hour for preparation, Rose declared, her tone resolute. Time is of the essence, and we can't afford to waste any. Once ready, we'll secure a local guide and head westward. An hour? Marcellus let out a horrified exclamation. It can't be. Oh, his protest was cut short by a forceful kick under the table, causing him to yelp in pain. Yet, Rose's primary focus was on observing Shan's response, to which he offered a subtle nod. Perfect, Rose evaluated the situation, temporarily setting aside her exhaustion as she turned her attention back to her meal. This brief reprieve was a moment to gather her energy, and she had no intention of expending it on anything else. However, her thoughts soon drifted toward the dangers that awaited them within the mysterious Nimrith forest, a realm both ancient and perilous, a formidable barrier along the Empire's western edge. In a short while, they would embark on their journey, relying on their skills and wits to achieve their mission or vanish from the world like so many before who had ventured into the depths of the Nimrith forest. Chapter 3.5 Side Story of My Copper, Silver, and Gold. Trudging with anger and frustration in her step, the young woman known among students of Arcanum academics as My the Beast was consumed by her emotions. She had just had a heated argument with Sean at the tavern. Everything felt wrong in this place, the village of Copia, or whatever it was called. It reeked, and its people were nothing more than ignorant peasants who subjected her to their prying, judgmental stares. My made sure to conceal her face once more under the deep hood of her cloak, disregarding the noon sun scorching the village with its unforgiving embrace. Her thoughts raced like a thunderstorm, fists clenched, she reveled in her frustration. As she walked through the village, the people around her grew increasingly obnoxious and annoying. Inadvertently, Mai began searching for a quiet, secluded place. Wandering through the streets, she soon reached a less frequented and nearly empty side of the village. Before long, she stood before the building. It was no ordinary house, though. The aged sign displayed the recognizable symbol of an adventurer's guild, and although the place looked old, weathered, and run down, she could hear quiet voices from inside. This was the place she needed just now. With a faint smile, she opened the door and stepped in, escaping the sunny outside. The interior was dimly lit, filled with the faint scent of old wood, alcohol, and tobacco. She saw 3 patrons sitting around, all of them old retired adventurers. They looked at the young newcomer with curiosity, and all the speaking stopped. Decisive steps led Mike to the bar where another old, rough-looking, slightly overweight man was tending. She took a seat on one of the bar stools, arms crossed on the bar, waiting patiently for the bartender to approach her. Soon enough, the man came to her, but not before he exchanged amused glances with other patrons. "Sorry to disappoint, but we serve adventurers only, and we don't take job offers here," he said, polishing the insides of ceramic cups. "Then there should not be any problems. Do you have some fruit juice in stock, perhaps?" Mai asked with a playful smile, earning a chuckle from the patrons. "I said I cannot serve you," the bartender repeated himself calmly after a slight pause while inspecting the perfectly clean cup he was scrubbing. Then he continued with its polishing. "Why is that?" "I am an adventurer, you see." The man thought for a moment before looking directly at Mai. "It's true that I haven't seen you here before, kid. Show me your identification if that's true." "Sure thing." Mai reached into her armor, retrieving a slightly crooked and bent copper plate the size of her palm. With a metallic scrape, she sent the thing closer to the man. The bartender took the plate skeptically into his hands. He looked it over disinterested at first, but when he saw 2 golden marks bearing the seal of the Adventurers Guild on the plate, he took a closer look, now putting it further for his old eyes to inspect it properly. "You didn't take this from some dead adventurer somewhere, did you, kid?" He skeptically gave it back, but now took an interested look at Mai's gear and clothes. "It sure looks like I did," Mai smiled at the man, only now taking her hood down. "Do you have some juice or not?" After some thought, the man shrugged and was about to leave for the back as he answered. "You're lucky that I have grandkids, missy. I have some fruits lying about." The bartender's actions interested the other patrons, and as he left, one of the men asked Mai, "So you are an adventurer after all?" Mai turned on the stool to face the man speaking from one of the tables. He was a well-built older gentleman with a pipe in his hand. Her elbows leaned on the bar, waiting for the bartender to return with her juice. "When I feel like it." "Mind if I ask your stars?" he asked with old man's excitement apparent in his voice. All of us were coppers. Kalen here was the best of us, with 5 stars. He pointed at another patron sitting at a different table, holding the handle of a tankard. Was? Kalen grumbled at his friend. 2 golds, my answered with a smile, watching all the old men drop their jaws. My ears are not what they once were. Did you just say 2 golds? The old man who she was talking to stood up and moved closer to the bar, sitting next to her. He looked to be in his 60s, but still carried himself proudly. Yeah, is that so hard to believe? My turn to face the man. Here, as fresh as they come. The bartender returned, placing a wet cup filled with green juice in front of my. You said it's for your grandkids. My looked at the bartender. I thought you only serve adventurers. They are adventurers, all right. The bartender smiled brightly at her question. They just don't carry the copper with them just yet. He hinted at the copper plate my had hidden back into her armor just moments ago. Oi, don't change the subject, the man who had just sat down at the bar spoke. I just can't believe that you are gold, and 2 golds on top of that. What would an adventurer of that renown even do here? I don't know, my deflected the question with a shrug. Why is that hard to believe anyway? I've met plenty of 4 or 5 golds, it's not that rare. Then you are either from Augustalis, or you are just making this up, the man laughed. Have you ever met someone really famous then? Like Seraphina, the Dragon Slayer, or Drusus Thunderclaw? Seraphina? I'm sorry, I don't know her. My blushed slightly as the name was alien to her, but Drusus, I know. Did you meet him? I did, in passing only, though. My tried to remember more about that man. I know of him mostly from what Sean told me. He was a member of Arcanum, wasn't he, Drusus, I mean? I heard so. The old adventurer nodded his head. I heard that his power is in his weapons. He is an enchanter, after all. He wouldn't amount to much without them. Trying to recollect as much as she knew, Mai said what Sean had told her about the famous mage. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? The man chuckled. And ballsy. I could probably face him without his gear, Mai suggested, lost in thought. She understood well the strength that could be imbued into an item through a potent enchantment. It would be similar to fight without relying on her magical markings. You sure believe in yourself, the old adventurer laughed. Do you perhaps have any stories to share? Only if you trade me one for one, Mai smiled back at the old man. But I don't have much time, have to go soon. After that, all of them sat down at the table, barkeep included. Everyone shared their names, and story time began. The man who approached Mai, called Thorn, was the leader of the group named Thornwood Explorers. Kalen and the bartender, named Grim, had been part of the party for years. The last patron was named Alden and hailed from the far side of the Empire. As an adventurer, he had traveled throughout the Empire and its surroundings before finding his peace in this place after years of wielding a sword. Just minutes after they sat down, 2 young rascals joined in, a boy and a girl around the age of 7, and Grim went to tend to his grandkids. Meanwhile, Mai learned interesting bits about the place. This very building was once a much more frequented spot for adventurers, thanks to its proximity to the Nimrith forest and its unexplored promises of adventure and wealth. Over time, it became too dangerous for the returns, and only occasionally did adventurers come from Arvina with lucrative and specific jobs. After some time, this place became a spot for adventurers to restock and catch their breath on their journeys. The guild itself wanted to close it for good, but Grim fought them and managed to keep it running. When it was Mai's turn to share one of her stories, the door to the room swung open again. A tall, well-built man, clad in plate armor with an ornate rose-red tabard and matching cape, entered. His expensive sword was sheathed at his side, and a shield rested on his back. Despite his tired and dirty appearance, armor soaked in mud, slightly rusted, and a torn cape and tabard, the man's steps were firm and decisive. Grim noticed the newcomer and sprang into action, rushing toward the armor-clad man. Master Roderick, are you all right? Where is Alicia and the rest of? As the name Alicia left Grim's lips, Roderick grabbed him, pulling the old man close with a steely grip. His eyes burned with rage as he gritted through his teeth. She's dead. Everyone is dead. Releasing Grim, he ordered, "Now get me something to eat and drink," and moved toward one of the tables. While Grim hurried to the kitchen to prepare something for the tired adventurer, the other patrons, along with Mai, remained at their table. "Who is that man? What happened?" Mai asked them, genuinely curious. Losing party members was a harsh reality, a risk of the job, but Roderic's callous demeanor struck her as particularly distasteful. "We saw him a few days ago," Thorn replied quietly. "He arrived from Arvina with a request to gather magical flora and crystals from Nimrith. There were 3 others with him." "I think Grim said that Roderick is ranked at 4 silvers, Alden added, leaning slightly forward. "He should be fairly capable," Mai mused, her eyes fixed on Roderick from her seat. "Their party was called Crimson Blood, a terrible name, if you ask me," Thorn continued. It looked like he was leading them. He and Alicia were asking Grim about the forest. The low conversation was still audible in the room, catching Roderic's attention. He approached them, his heavy footsteps echoing in the hush of the tavern. Towering over their table, his tired face twisted with animosity. "What is this? 3 dying old bastards and a kid gossiping about my misfortune?" he growled. "Would you just shut up and mind your own business?" His outburst ended with a shout, and he slammed his armored hand on the table, spilling drinks and leaving a visible dent in the wood. "We mean no disrespect." Thorn began, attempting to defuse the situation, but Roderic's eyes locked onto Mai's. Defiant, she met his gaze, her lips curved into a slight smile, provoking him further. "Oh, we have a fool here," Roderick sneered, his rage transforming into a devilish grin. "Do I have to spell it out for you?" Leaning closer to her, his attempt to intimidate fell short. "Here's your beer, it's cold, it'll cool you down," Grim interjected, appearing with a drink and a plate. "And this is today's bread. Enjoy them in peace." He set the items on Roderic's table before backing away. "And, of course, it's on the house," the tavern keeper offered with a softer tone. "And get my money too," Roderick said, eyeing Grim while keeping his focus on Mai. "But first, I need to teach this runt her place." "I wouldn't do that," Grim cautioned, hesitating. "You shut up, old man, and get me my money." "About that," Grim said, clearly reluctant to speak, not wanting to further enrage Roderick. Mai anticipated the situation and, fond of the tavern's elderly owner, she stood up, drawing all of Roderic's attention back to her. "Isn't it common courtesy to present your results before asking for money?" she asked calmly, her arms crossed, standing fearlessly in front of him. "What do you care?" Roderick growled. "It just seems like you're a total loser, coming here and demanding respect and money. And for what? Are you just a poser, or what?" She taunted him with a calm voice. "Mai, what are you doing?" Thorn asked her quietly. "Just asking some questions," she responded without breaking eye contact with Roderick. "Were you bullied as a kid?" she inquired, her lips curving into a slight smile. "That's enough." In a fit of rage, Roderick reached out for Mai, grabbing her cape. She pulled away and slipped out of the cape, revealing more of her skin. Intricate, multicolored magical sigils covered her arms, neck, and upper chest, visible. Despite her petite frame, she displayed considerable muscle. "Don't touch me, you brute," she said, her voice low, as she prepared to defend herself. Barely visible shimmer ran over all of the sigils on her body as she clenched her fists. "Or what?" he challenged, failing to grasp the situation as he reached for her again. "Or I will break your bones," snatching his arm by the wrist, her grip unnaturally tight. Roderick struggled but couldn't overpower her. "What is this?" A surprised howl escaped him. Mai didn't respond. Channeling magic through her sigils, she tightened her grip, causing Roderic's gauntlet to bend. With a pained scream, he dropped to his knees, desperately trying to free his hand. Terror filled his eyes as he looked up at Mai. She had been wanting to test the new sigil she had created a few weeks prior, one etched on her left hand. With Shan's assistance, she had designed a magical circuit to manipulate magnetism. This seemed like the perfect moment to try its power. Frustrated that she didn't want to cause serious harm, she slightly reduced the sigil's strength. Then, with a swift punch to Roderic's chest, she released the pulse. Though not a powerful blow, it took even Might by surprise. She maintained her grip, and Roderick was flung to the side. The pulse proved much stronger than she had anticipated, causing nearby chairs to slide and topple. The tavern door burst open, and cutlery and metal cups clattered to the floor. Mai, astonished by the power of her magic, looked down at Roderick lying unconscious on the ground at her feet, his hand contorted unnaturally. Only then did she release her grip on his wrist. Her smile revealed a mix of delight and surprise. "I apologize, I didn't mean to overdo it to this extent. I thought he would be stronger," she lied, smiling as she glanced at the astonished and slightly horrified old men around her. "Do you have a healer in town? It would be wise to get one." She rifled through her coin purse. "Here, for the juice and the busted door. My apologies for the chaos." Placing a silver coin on the table, she headed for the door, intending to find Sean and report her success with the new glyph.